It's 3 minutes after 10. A very good morning indeed to you. If you're just tuning in, the Prime Minister, and I suppose if you've been on holiday or something, you might be surprised to learn the Prime Minister is Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham's now the Prime Minister. The 17th in the last 2 weeks that we've had, or something like that. He is poised, as we speak, to deliver a speech. I think he is visiting a care home somewhere in London, and he is poised to deliver a speech about his plans for social care. I forgot to do it the other day. We should have got a little clip of Boris Johnson standing, I think, on the metaphorical steps of Downing Street, insisting that he had an oven-ready plan for fixing social care, and he was going to enact it immediately, I suppose, if you were to make excuses for him. Which much of the British media continues to do, of course. You could point out that they may have been scuppered by COVID, but that wouldn't explain why the plan was never revealed. So what do you think Burnham's going to do today? Do you think he's going to actually outline a feasible, workable, plausible plan? Or at least put in motion a process that will deliver one? Looks that way, because Louise Casey is, I think, the lady who is going to be leading this initial stage. Or is he going to do a Boris Johnson and just promise that he'll fix it, but he can't tell you when, and there is a brilliant plan, but it goes to a different school? It's a reminder, isn't it, of the fact that Prime Minister after Prime Minister after Prime Minister has promised to fix this. Aren't we a weird old bunch? We were talking yesterday about our interest in issues and why it waxes and wanes, and why it can be high and low, and why some things that aren't objectively very interesting might fascinate us more than things that are obviously more objectively interesting, like our own mortality or the fate of our species. I was asking, in case you weren't listening, why I am personally so tempted to look away from the wildfires in France and Spain at the moment. A very, very, very powerful piece of radio as a consequence of asking you that question. But why are we suddenly all obsessing about social care again? Is it a tradition almost? Is it like putting tinsel up at Christmas? We get a new Prime Minister, we all start talking about social care. Yeah, I mean, it isn't, of course, because it's what they do. Theresa May was arguably scuppered by social care, and I spent one day earlier this week utterly bamboozled by why, because it doesn't make sense that Theresa May was undone by her proposals to social care, which were, from any angle, if you were motivated by a desire to spend less of your own money on your own social care, hers were an improvement upon what went before. The amount of money you were allowed to keep, however much you had, went up from 23,000 to 100,000. Now, look, admittedly, some people are going to end up spending nearly $1 million or more, and it's scant consolation to them. But objectively and mathematically, the number that you were allowed to keep went up. So why was everyone so furious about it? Why did it essentially undermine her electoral ambitions? I know there was something in there about also accommodating social care when it happens at home, as opposed to only residential social care. But in my memory, that was not what everybody was getting really angry about. And it was suggested to me by somebody who understands these things, these matters, that it was actually another road that leads back to Boris Johnson, of all people, would you believe? And that the reason why the right-wing media turned that proposal into such a controversy was because in order to launch a putsch against Theresa May and deliver the one true Brexit, Boris Johnson needed her to become unpopular, and she wasn't. This is possibly a media conspiracy theory too far, but that was the theory as explained to me, and as apparently espoused by some former allies of Theresa May's, that the real reason it failed was because Boris Johnson's people successfully turned it into a much hotter potato than it ever should have been. And if you think I'm exaggerating, then remember that when who was the guy that got done for lobbying, and then instead of making him stand subject to parliamentary standards rules, they had a kind of gathering at the Garrick Club, all these sort of Telegraph Tory figures, and sort of tried to come up with a plan to save him after he had been found to have breached the standards, breached the rules. They wanted, I think Jacob Rees-Mogg was involved, they wanted to rip up the rule book rather than see one of their own held to account by the rules that everybody else had to abide by. So it is not beyond the wit of man. It is not beyond all possibility that theory of Theresa May was correct. I can tell you that Yvette Cooper is currently addressing the assembled throngs. Baroness Louise Casey is present, Yvette Cooper doing the introductions, and then she will introduce Baroness Louise Casey, followed by the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. It was Owen Paterson, Craig. Thank you. Great stuff. We should probably get the clip while we're at it of Boris Johnson announcing that he had an oven-ready social care plan in approximately 2017. Yes, Owen Paterson. They sort of set up the Save Owen Paterson Society when he should really have been held to account for his own misdeeds. I think we'll take Louise Casey as well. I'll be interested to hear what she has to say, and she is one of those rare figures in British public life who is almost always worth listening to. That gives you some hope that Andy Burnham has made the right appointment here. And speaking of hope, if you're looking for something to read while you listen to the Prime Minister's speech, my newspaper column today in the Eye addresses precisely that line that I've shared with you a billion times from the old film Clockwise. I can deal with the despair, Laura. It's the hope that gets me, and that is how I am currently feeling about Andy Burnham, as you will know if you've been party to the Bob, the Burnham Optimism Barometer, which kicks in every Monday and allows us just to take a little bit of a reading of whether or not this new Prime Minister's excellent beginning is sustaining the optimism that he originally generated. So far, I would say so good. So we'll listen to Baroness Casey, we'll listen to Andy Burnham, we'll listen to Andy Burnham answering questions from the media, and then we'll have a conversation. And what that conversation will involve will depend partly on what we actually hear. It is likely to address something that we did not address yesterday. If you were listening yesterday, how surprised were you when I told you that the split was more or less 50-50? It's actually 51-49. It's almost the infernal ratio. But when you look at the social care budget, only 49% of it is spent on the elderly. 51% of it is spent on what normal people call working age adults. So, post-18, pre-pension. And that means that they have got disabilities and debilitating conditions that necessitate care. Most of which will be provided by family members in a financial situation that is parlous, absolutely parlous. And we've not talked about that. And that's weird, right? Because what's the question? Or what's the phrase I always use when I'm talking about residential care for elderly relatives? What's the phrase I always use? Come on, all together now. It is a subject about which you know nothing until you need, all together now, to know everything. But why have we only talked about that in the context of dementia or debilitation due to advancing years? What happens if you get hit by the metaphorical bus and survive? What happens if you suddenly need social care in your own home? Never mind residential. What actually happens then? That also surely is a subject about which you know nothing until you need to know everything, and it's always missing. Is it a bit like, and this is going to be a bit of a reach, so frankly I hope Louise Casey gets up soon because I might regret opening this particular thought process, but is it a bit like the conversation we had yesterday about wildfires? So you know you're going to get old, and you know you're probably, it's about a 1 in 10 chance that you're going to get dementia, so you're going to know someone to whom it happens, but you don't want to contemplate the possibility of being brought low yourself medically. You talk about dementia, you're mostly thinking about someone else. When you ring into the show, you're telling me about someone else, which means that when you're listening to the show, you're thinking about someone else. You're wondering whether it will happen to your nan or whether it will happen to your dad. But when you look at disability and support for people with disabilities and debilitating conditions, you should really be thinking about you. And here is Dame Louise Casey, Baroness.
I found myself here and I'm slightly daunted by it, which is unusual for me, they will tell you. The first thing I wanted to say is it just means a great deal that there are some people here today that started this journey with us 18 months ago, people with lived experience, who are here today. It means so much, actually, to me and to the whole team and to colleagues across government that, I don't know, I feel like a new day is starting, and that for the last 18 months we have heard, listened and been open to the fact that people are living in such difficult circumstances. And sometimes they're living in those difficult circumstances because the state, we, public services, make it harder. And actually perhaps we could do some stuff to make it slightly easier, even if we just recognise the fact that dementia is a disease and that people live with it, and maybe we could do more about it. And some of the asks I think we have are actually quite modest, and some of the asks we are going to have will not be, I'm just checking at Secretaries of State and Prime Ministers, will not be quite so modest. But anyway, today I think the Secretary of State for Health, Yvette, quite rightly pointed out for the last 27 years there's been 22 reviews. Colleagues in my team have done a deep dive into all of those reviews, and we know that one of the things that nobody got right is actually a conversation, an involvement. It's not a consultation, it's an involvement with the general public on where we are as a country right now. When it's an extraordinary country, when we set up the National Health Service and the rest of the welfare state after the war, nobody ducked doing really big, difficult things. And I find ourselves 50 years later with a population that has 12 million of us that are already over the age of 67. We've got a fast growing group of people that are working age disabled. But off the barometer is the fact that we have hospitals that have huge numbers of frail elderly people in them that simply never needed to be there in the first place, that are absorbing, frankly, and they feel bad about it. I've got lived experience myself of this. The last thing they want to do is take. The last thing they want to do is be a bother. The last thing they want to do is end up in hospital. So if we did a better job before, we would never have to have an after. It's a privilege to be here in Jewish Care again this morning. This is a different job that I'm in, but I'm back here in Jewish Care. And to be honest, if you had a chance, you should take a look round and think, isn't this what we would want for people? People still living in their homes and getting support and help so they're able to stay in their homes. And at the point they can no longer stay in their homes, they're living their home, not a project, not a hostel, but a home with people that will look after them for the rest of their time. So it's an absolute privilege. The thing I'm meant to do, is we are launching the most important thing. There's always going to be a problem with me, isn't there? Sorry, Pippa. Today, everyone, we are launching the big conversation on care. Okay. We could completely screw it up. Don't clap me yet. The key thing here is that all the previous 22 reviews might have had an idea they consulted against, if I'm being tough around the edges, but nobody had the big conversation. What does care mean? Who should get it? What should you do as a family? How much could you do for yourself? And how do we get this right? And then when does the state step in? And more importantly, at some point for all the politicians, who pays? But actually, who pays is a personal thing. There are people out there right now in this country paying huge amounts of money towards their care, and we shouldn't forget that. So anyway, the big conversation is, I think, going to be the game changer that tries to renegotiate, if you're, the social contract, I think is what people would say, with the public, and then help us as a country work out together how we can fix and solve this big problem. And I would just say, as a woman who worked during the pandemic, can I just remind everybody that nobody thought we could get everybody in off the streets? Everyone did. So we can do difficult in this country, and we can do it well. And that's partly why it is my absolute pleasure to, and honour indeed, to introduce the Prime Minister, who is also the son of a dad who has Alzheimer's and is therefore completely cognizant of the difficulties and challenges in daily life. And now he's our Prime Minister. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Andy Burnham.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Lovely welcome there. I'm just looking around the room. I see a lot of faces who've been on this journey with me for a long time. Many of you, you know who you all are. You've probably got a feeling of deja vu, don't you? You've probably got that, but don't have that, because this time we're going to do it, right? We're going to do it. You don't take anything on without doing it, do you, Louise? So let's make sure we do. And lots of new faces as well. Fantastic to be with you all this morning. I was going to speak from notes, but for the reasons Louise just gave, you can't, can you? You can't speak from notes. I've just got to speak from the heart when it comes to this issue, because it is very, very personal for me right now and for my family. We've kind of lived it in the last few years from the inside, and the only thing you can do is talk from that. Why you can't do this job, in my view, without bringing all of that to it, and kind of then using that emotion, if you like, to kind of make the change and be brave in making that change. And that's what I intend to do, as I'm going to explain. There's lots I can say about what's wrong with the system. I will come to that, but I want to start with what's good about the system, because sometimes when we talk about social care, we don't do that enough, do we? And I see so much good in terms of the journey that we've been on. And I am talking about the people who've cared for my dad. Hundreds of them we've seen and we've watched. You know, when someone in your family is receiving care, you look at everything through new eyes, don't you? You notice things that maybe you didn't notice before, because you watch it so closely and so carefully. And I've just been really, I don't know, overwhelmed by their care, the skill in what they do, the professionalism. It really is incredible, and it's humbling to watch them caring for someone else's dad or someone else's mum. If you think about that, you know, bringing all of that to the care of someone else's relative, it's just an incredible thing, isn't it? That, to me, they should be the best paid people in society, not the worst. And, you know, I just start with that feeling. And I need to say this, because, you know, many people from other countries have been caring for my dad. I want those carers to know we appreciate you. We appreciate what you are doing to support people here. And that really matters that I say that as well. There is so much to be proud of. I mentioned the skill and the care and the professionalism. I watch sometimes how people communicate with my dad, and they're able to capture a kind of a moment of the old character. It kind of just will come out because of the way they draw in the conversation, and that is an amazing talent to have. But also moving from a wheelchair to an armchair, or from there to a bed without distress or discomfort, it is incredibly demanding and skillful what they do, and that needs to be recognised. I also want to recognise the good organisations, care organisations in all sectors. And as Louise said, we are really lucky to be in one today. I visited Jewish Care here in Enfield with the Member of Parliament, Sarah, 10 years ago, just about. And I remember thinking, well, this is the gold standard. This is how it should be. And we're lucky to have a sister organisation in Manchester called The Fed, leader of Bury Council here today, chair of the LGA. He knows what I mean when I say that's whole person care, Eamon, isn't it? When you know it when you see it, and you see it there at the Fed, you see it here at Jewish Care. I see it at the faith-based charity who run my dad's care home. I see the same. I see good in all sectors. And let's celebrate the good in social care before we turn to the things that we know need to be better. And before we then say, and how have we got to this position? When it comes to the bad, I think there's only one group really to blame, and that's my generation of politicians. It's almost 30 years since the Royal Commission on Social Care. 30 years. And in that time, what did Yvette say? 22 reviews. I mean, it's a major dereliction of public duty that Parliament has not faced up to this, of all challenges, something so fundamental to life as this. It's shameful, to be honest, that politicians have put point scoring before fixing this issue. But that's what's happened. It's created a feeling in Westminster that this is too difficult, and if you take it on, you're taking on too big a political risk. Or how come we've got to a position where it's too difficult to fix the basic care that we give to each other, that fellow human beings receive? I mean, how has Parliament got itself to that position? And there is something here that is a test for the political and the media culture in this country when it comes to this issue, how it's spoken about, how it's reported. It's for everybody. Everybody needs to take on board what is being launched today with this big conversation, because I think everybody needs to engage in it responsibly, needs to remember who they are talking about, what they are talking about, the people who work within it, and to do it respectfully and to do it accurately. I just think that's a really important starting point, and I feel I need to say that. Because the current situation, frankly, is bad for everybody. It's certainly bad for the people who don't get the care that they need. It's estimated today in England around 2 million adults have unmet care needs. Now, think about that for a moment and what that means. I can, again, certainly attest from family experience that it's too hard for the family carers. And the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, was quite right to talk about that on the radio this morning and say how important it is that we see people struggling in their homes, looking after a partner or a relative. It can break people if they're kind of left without that support that they need. In fact, it does break people, and that needs to be recognised. It needs to be recognised that people can see everything they've worked for wiped out by the costs of care. Hundreds of thousands of pounds can just disappear paying for care. Adults with disabilities will say that they face very unfair care charges just to live their life. That needs to be recognised. And let me come back to the staff doing what they do on poverty pay. I've been made aware of somebody homeless working in a care setting, living out of a mobile home. Just again, think about that. How can we enable those staff to give a real sense of security to the people they're looking after if they do not have it in their own lives? And it makes what they do all the more remarkable that they do care in the way that they do. But we cannot take them for granted, and we must not do that. So it's bad for everybody in this, but it's also bad for the National Health Service. And let me just say something about that. Again, I've had experience in the system as it currently is, which is trying to give out care in 15-minute slots, because honestly, that's all that councils say that they can afford for many people. It's fine if the needs are moderate and you can complete the task within that time slot, but what if they're not? What if the needs become moderate or severe and you try and carry out everything within 15 minutes? I can tell you from experience that that can be a recipe for quite significant chaos if you are not careful. And it leaves the staff in a really difficult position, because often what they are told, if they have a problem and they can't complete what they're doing, ring 999. Yeah. Ring 999. And I heard a few kind of yeses in the audience and a few nods. I know, and I'm saying this, there'll be people watching who know what I'm talking about. That can be a really frightening experience, because it often isn't the case that that person needs hospitalisation. In fact, you could say it's the worst place for them to end up. But once that process is underway, it's very difficult to stop the drag of the system into hospital and then everything that comes from that. That's bad for the NHS too and the staff who work there. It's a lose-lose situation, because often people then spend a long time in A&E, a long time in hospital, but then fit to be discharged and can't be discharged. It just is a pressure that the NHS struggles to meet. And look at it in the numbers. Today, or on the latest figures, about 6 million people, just there or thereabouts, over 65, are going to A&E every year. Now, some of those will be from social care settings. If you go back to 2010, it was about half, roughly 3 million. So you can see that change in that period. Last month, 13,600 people were deemed medically fit to be discharged, but couldn't be. That was in an average across the month in England. 3,000 people every single day receiving corridor care. Corridor care. The trade unions now are monitoring corridor care. Do you remember there was a time when that was what you called the winter pressures? Well, these are year-round now, and staff in the NHS are trying to deal with those pressures every single day. And there's growing talk of burnout amongst NHS staff because the pressure they are trying to deal with is simply too great. And it's not sustainable. If you think about all of those things, then you know the NHS cannot carry on in that position. And let's not have a conversation about social care as though it lives in its own silo. It doesn't live in its own silo. It's intrinsically linked to the National Health Service and what happens there. When I left office as Health Secretary, wasn't all my doing, but 98% of people there or thereabouts were going through A&E within 4 hours. If you look at that figure today, it's about 75%. And there is just no way that we can restore the NHS to the standards that we would all want to see without fixing this issue. We can't do it. So we need to face up to it with a new determination. We need to bring our best game to this and not the sort of stock in trade of Westminster, business as usual, and just finding a reason to score points rather than actually face up to what's involved here, given that it involves so many vulnerable people, so many underpaid staff, and so many under pressure people in our National Health Service. We need to bring the best of us to solving this issue because it affects all of us in one way or another. So that brings me then to what I want to announce today. 3 announcements, and you've already got a flavour of some of them, but this is what I've decided to do coming into office to bring things forward. And the first thing is to ask Baroness Casey Louise to bring forward her review by a year. So working with Yvette and with Angela and other colleagues, we want to expedite that review. We ideally want to do it even sooner, but we've got to be realistic. But if we say a year from now that we have that independent review, then I think we can rise to this challenge with the urgency it requires. So that's the first announcement. And let me also just say something about what I want that review to address. I go back to what we proposed in 2010, and Phil Hope was Minister at that time, a National Care Service. A National Care Service. Well, why do we talk about that? Because we need to talk about a system that can become highly integrated with the NHS. Social care is different. It has to be person-centred. If it's not person-centred, like the brilliant care provided here at Jewish Care, then it won't be what people would recognise as social care. You don't want to over-medicalise care, but it has to be very integrated with the rest of the system. It has to be preventative in its character. It has to be person-centred. And that's what we're asking Louise to give us her report on. How do we deliver a national care service in England that sits alongside the National Health Service, works in a similar way, that is highly integrated and can optimise the journey of a patient. If a patient's leaving home to hospital, back as quickly as possible, and there's no delay. We also then ask for a principle of home care wherever possible, so that we have an approach that supports people where they should be and often where they want to be, rather than ending up in a hospital bed. So how do we deliver a national care service? And there are different ways of doing it. You could do the fully fledged version, or you could do a lesser version. And you could do something in between, and then you have the question of how you pay for all of those options. But that's the stuff of the review, and the big conversation will feed that review. And again, I would ask everybody to engage with it in that way. The second announcement is to immediately, and not wait for the review, focus on the social care workforce. We already have a situation where the government has agreed a fair pay agreement for social care staff to come in financial year 2028-29, and that is a major step forward. And I pay tribute to Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, as was when that was brought forward. That is a massive building block of a national care service. And what I'm going to ask the ministerial group led by Yvette, Angela and John Healy joining too, will be to look at how we turn the fair pay agreement into a bigger reform to improve the social care workforce, to lift it up, to lift it closer to NHS standards, in fact to integrate it more with the NHS workforce, and actually to start to think about progression routes for young people coming into social care, so they can progress from social care into NHS positions as well, and think about it as one workforce. We will not get the care service we all want until we improve the strength and the capability of care at the very front of the service. And that means lifting up the social care workforce as best we possibly can. Yes, in terms of pay, but also in terms of training and the wider support we give them, the security of their roles. And that is the commitment I'm giving today. That is an essential enabler of the reform that we wish to see. The third announcement is to start right now initiating cross-party talks on social care. And yes, I have been here before, and yes, I do have some of the scars of that, but it's the right thing to do. I stood on the steps of Downing Street just a few days ago, and I said I wanted to create a new way of doing politics in this country. More problem solving, less point scoring. And this is the first big test of that. And I mean what I say. We won't fix this through politics as usual. We have to bring a different approach. And I'm really pleased that today I've invited both of the main parties that have written to me to start those talks. And they will begin later today. And the thing is, if you know me and you know what I've said on this issue in the past, if you were to search what I've said about social care, you will see it all, and you will, some of you are writing stories about what I've said. And I stand by what I've said. But here's the point. Ed Davey was right about this morning. We're all going to have to give and take here, aren't we, if we're going to get to a solution? We're all going to have to listen to each other, something we don't do particularly well in politics. Actually engage and listen to other perspectives. We're going to have to find common ground here. If this is to be a lasting solution, it requires common ground to be found. And then ultimately, you would hope, a new social consensus can emerge about social care. So all of that is required if we are to get there. And that process starts today. It will run alongside the other streams of work that we are doing, but I will work closely with the other parties who want to be involved to have that conversation. But what I would say in closing is I'm not going to be deflected by the point scoring or the screaming headlines that comes out of that point scoring. That is what has set back social care. And I come back to this point about the political culture of this country and the media culture of this country. If we're trying to shut down the fact that you have a serious debate about an issue like this, if that's what that is trying to do, well, it's shame on all of us if we let that happen, if we say, well, I'm not brave enough then to go into that. Well, I'm just not going to kind of do that in my time in office. I am making this a test of myself, whether I can bring forward a solution, and that is what I want to do. I would never forgive myself, ever. Who knows how long I will be in this position, but as long as I am, I will do my best to find a solution. And I would never forgive myself if I left without having tried, because of some of the headlines that will inevitably appear and some of the efforts that some people will make to create scare stories about the whole issue. Well, you can't create scare stories when people are already scared by what they're seeing anyway, through their own eyes, in their own homes or in care homes. You can't create scare stories for the staff when they're kind of living the life that they have to live. They kind of see it anyway. And, you know, you can have as many headlines as you like about this tax or something else, but when people are losing hundreds of thousands of pounds, everything they've worked for, well, what about them? And it seems that those stories don't really often think about the people who've already lost far, far more, and that indeed almost lost everything. So that's the way I'm coming at it, and I'm no doubt more of those headlines will appear. But I'm just going to be really clear about this. I'm going to stick this out. I'm going to back Louise 100% in what she is doing and her review. I'm going to back Yvette, Angela, and all of the ministerial team as we face up to this together. We're going to do it with strength. We're going to do it with resolution. I'm going to work and reach out with the other political parties, and that's not just a kind of passing statement today. That's a commitment that I'm making today. And why am I going to do it? Why am I going to do all of those things for my dad and the millions like him up and down the country? Thank you very much.
Social care speech there from Andy Burnham. Time now for the Prime Minister to take, I think, about half a dozen questions from assembled members of the media. We'll stay with that.
I'm standing here on my own, going to take questions. I was hoping that the cavalry might have... No, I'm really joking. Alison Holt I've got first from the BBC. Alison.
Prime Minister, we've had plenty of cross-party talks before. As you know all too well, what are you going to do differently this time, which will lead to a different result? And if I may, today's short notice talks, some have called them a show. Are they? And can you get meaningful change before the next election and more point scoring?
I think in terms of what will be different this time, Alison, if I look back to that experience that I had as Health Secretary in the 2005 to 2010 Parliament, we probably left the reform too late in that Parliament, and it got too close to a general election. And learning from that, that's why I'm bringing forward, one of the reasons why I'm bringing forward Louise's review, because I think it's better to do it sooner and further away from an election. And that answers another story for the media, doesn't it? That there's no election on the horizon. I think it's best to deal with it early and to listen, because often what we can do is then drop a solution out late. Engage now. Don't have cross-party talks when a solution is emerging, again, which is what we did back then. Build it with people. So do it now. Get people in now and start talking, understanding the different perspectives. I don't know whether it's possible to find agreement, but let's give it a try. You mentioned late notice. Well, I had two approaches at the weekend. I had a letter from the Leader of the Opposition and from the Leader of the Liberal Democrats. Would I engage? And so, well, I said yes, so I don't think it's... When I've been asked, I was only responding to that ask. But I'm glad that we will have those talks today with the Shadow Health Secretary and the Leader of the Liberal Democrats. But it's just the start. And no, it's not for show. How could it be, given what I've said this morning? This is huge for me. I know that this will require me to put what political capital I have on the table, and it could sort of wear down that political capital in some ways, but I'm prepared to do it. I'm prepared to do it because this has gone on too long. The risks of failing to act are too great. Thank you. Rebecca Barry from ITV. Probably should keep this with me, shouldn't I?
ITV News has revealed some shocking failures in social care. You saw that in our report that was broadcast just last night. Can the government realistically transform social care without raising taxes?
Well, I would start by saying this is a question of standards within organisations, and we're in one today that meets the highest standards, and we praise Lord Levy and all of the team here, but we also know that care is variable across different organisations. There's good in all sectors, I said that at the start, but there's profiteering in this sector as well, and there is unnecessary and dangerous cost-cutting at times on the backs of vulnerable people, and that is fundamentally unacceptable, and I'm pleased that ITV has exposed some of that poor practice in recent days. Is it possible? I think more is possible from within existing resources, and the things that I've talked about today, particularly around the workforce, will be fully funded. So let me just be clear about that. I think it is possible from existing budgets to do much more. I mentioned that whole thing of people coming into hospital unnecessarily from social care settings, then having a long length of stay in hospital as a result of that unnecessary admission, and then a long period where they're medically fit to leave but can't because the care is not available. Now that very last bit has been, I think it's been estimated, that costs the NHS around £2.5 billion a year. But if you add all of it up, you are talking several £billion a year is lost from the lack of a preventative front-end social care service that's well supported. So I think we owe it to the public, before we talk about tax rises, and I know Louise will help us with this, you first have to look the public in the eye and say, are we doing everything we can do from within what we've got? And I don't think we can say that, because we've taken a different approach to funding local government than we have to the NHS. But the effect of that has been just to pile pressure on the NHS, and we haven't got the incentives right between the two. So I think firstly you have to do more with what you've got, but I think Louise indicated some of what we would want to do in the fullest sense will require difficult decisions, but we will be honest with people about those. We will put them before the country at the right time, and we will hopefully proceed with people's consent. Next one, sorry. It's Sam Coates, looking right in.
Sam Coates, Sky News. I was hoping to get your instinct on a couple of areas of the social care debate. Do you think that you can only get funded care if you've got assets of less than £23,250? Do you think that figure is now too low? And do you think the fact that 85% of care homes run on a for-profit basis, do you think that figure is too high? And I hope people in the room don't think that this is crass, but it's a linked topic that is linked in the minds of the public. What's your position on assisted dying?
Okay, 23,500 I think is the threshold. So just so everyone watching knows, if people are, whatever you've got, home, pension, savings, can be whittled right down to that floor. And that's why I talked before about hundreds of thousands of pounds being on the table, you know, on the roulette table when people go into a later life, and who knows what can happen to any of us. I think social care in England is as unfair as American healthcare. The vulnerable pay with everything, and it can completely leave them with nothing. And you know, that floor has been in place for a long, long time, and common sense says it can't be fair. Obviously, the Dilnot report looked at that, at those issues, but we're 10 or more years on from Dilnot now. So, you know, those issues will have to be looked at. But it's not the case that the funding and the paying for social care is the only issue. As I've said before, there's a whole other set of issues here that have to be considered. I think the review should look at practice across the system and where the best care is to be found. I'm not saying today that one sector is too big and therefore it will need to change, but we do have to be sure that there isn't profiteering in the system. I think that is where we absolutely draw the line. There are good organisations in all sectors, but what we cannot accept is money being taken out. And we actually do see that happening, not just in adult social care, we see it in children's social care too. And I think we do need to kind of make some changes there to answer the question that I was answering before about making the most of the money that we've got. And then let me come to your third point, Sam, my position on assisted dying. I take the view that that debate, and I don't say that there shouldn't be a debate at some point about those issues. Personally, I think there's something that needs to happen first, and that's the fixing of the funding of palliative care and social care. I think it is very challenging to introduce that wider debate in a context of people not receiving that care and having the peace of mind about that care. And that's the way I kind of see this, and that's the position that I will stick to. Daniel next from The Telegraph.
Hello, Prime Minister. When you did your big conversation back in 2010, you came out very strongly in favour of compulsory insurance. Is that still what you're minded to bring in? You also ruled out tax rises. Is that something you can rule out now? And can I just ask another question on defence? Can you commit to 3% on defence by 2030?
Oh my goodness, that's getting your money's worth there, Daniel. So, I mean, I'd said before that I have views that are on the record, but life has moved on from when I was first looking at social care in 2010. We are in a difficult world from a financial point of view. And I would come back to what I said a moment ago. I can feel whatever I want to feel, but if I want to persuade others and get a cross-party consensus, you don't just go in and say, it's got to be my way and that's it. Because how do you persuade people? I think there are kind of ways of looking at this that could include a more voluntary approach initially, or could include a roadmap to a reformed social care system. To come back to the tax point, I will stick to the manifesto. That is important. There is a manifesto, there are commitments there on tax, and I will stick to those commitments. When it comes to defence, obviously those commitments too relate to the Parliament after this one, in terms of our NATO commitments. I have been very clear that we will honour those commitments. It does mean being prepared to look at challenging issues. There is that challenge about young people not in education, employment or training. I've shown a willingness this week to face up to some of those issues and start looking about how we move to a situation when we're investing in people's success rather than paying for failure. I think as a country at the moment we're doing the latter. We're paying for failure, and we're paying quite a lot actually for failure. I've talked about the cost of that to the NHS in terms of failing to fund social care at the front end, but I think that's also true of young people. We don't have an education system that supports young people who want technical qualifications. We don't do enough to support young people with special educational needs and disabilities through the school system. Kids with mental health challenges wait for months, even years to access that treatment. Then young people are going on to benefits in their 20s. It's the same argument. We've got to start investing in success and helping people succeed rather than paying for failure. And if we change those things, then we will open up the way of meeting our commitments on defence. Millie from The Independent.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Millie Cook from The Independent. Can you guarantee that people will no longer have to sell their homes to pay for care? And as you've acknowledged, you and others have tried to reform social care before. Looking back, what do you believe that you got wrong, and how should voters trust that this time will be different?
In an ideal world, I wouldn't want anybody to have to sell their home to pay for care. I think it's a really awful process for those who live through it. The whole thing of children taking power of attorney and then dealing with parents' finances. I think the whole thing is horrendous for those who live through it, and they see everything that their parents have worked for just whittled away in front of them, paying for care that often isn't good enough care in terms of what you would want for your mum and dad. So I think the system isn't right, and in an ideal world, no, I wouldn't want to see that. If I go back to what Daniel mentioned and the proposals I put forward, it was intended to stop that. You know, if everybody on the NHS principle contributed a little, it would mean everyone could protect the majority of what they'd worked for. Now, I don't know. I know the Mail probably in the Telegraph doesn't support that, but I don't know. What do people support that? And this is the point. What I got wrong, as I said before, was going too close to a general election when there just wasn't time for those issues to breathe. And I do ask colleagues in the media again, can we not let the country look at this in a quite clear-eyed way without all of the hype and the sort of the overwriting of some of these issues? On this issue, I just ask it again, on this issue, please, can we have a factual debate? Can we allow people to weigh up the different options that Louise might put forward and then just come to a considered view based on those facts? Is that too much to ask? I don't think it should be too much to ask, because I think the public will give us their view. They'll make it really clear what they feel they can accept and what they can't. But what we won't get to that point if there's all of this stuff swirling around and everyone frightened about everything. That just won't get us there. So we're all in this together. But yeah, I learned from that experience last time. I'm initiating cross-party talks today rather than a few weeks before a general election. So you live and you learn as a politician. But I hope that applies to everybody too. Let's do it better this time, and it does apply to everybody. And I think, have I got anyone else to call? I'm just looking to... bear with me. Oh, sorry, Chris. Yeah, I see other hands, and I don't know if we're going into a wider Q&A, unfortunately.
Thank you. You mentioned that one of the reasons why the previous 22 efforts had failed is that people were scared about headlines about tax. Is one of the aims of this national conversation to explain to people what they stand to gain by reforming the current system, and therefore make them more willing to consider those trade-offs in terms of how you pay for it? And you mentioned several different problems there. There's catastrophic costs that people face to have to sell their homes. There's eligibility through means tests and other criterion that means people get their help. And then there's the quality of care, which is provided by low-paid workforce reliant on immigration. Those are different challenges. So which of those do you prioritise?
Well, we look at them all in the round, is what we do. Because I think one of the failures, again, going back to what we got wrong in the past, has been just to look at one element of social care. Often, how do we pay for it? And how does it affect the individual? Those are important issues, but it's not the whole story. You do have to look at the situation of staff trying to provide it, the pressure on the NHS that results. You have to look at it all in the round, because actually some of the financial solutions may come from doing things differently and unlocking the unproductive spending that we have in other parts of the system. The issue is whether the big conversation will be allowed to open up these issues. That's why I was looking to Louise to see whether she wanted to come back up and just say something on this. The big conversation would be the place where those options could be put out there and people could give their view on their options. It's an independent process, so it's safe in some ways from government coming in and saying what can and can't be said. But Louise, it's over to you.
Yeah, I think it's just really important at this stage that we don't overmanage with kind of letting, dare I say it, media decide what questions we should be talking about with the British public. So my view is we need to involve the public in what they think care is, what they want to do themselves as families, what they think is reasonable, what they think they need help with. It's as simple as that. Some of those things can be really small, and yet as a system we make them really difficult, through to them who they think they are prepared to support and who they think their taxes or any other form of personal money should support. And we go through the gamut of all the options. I think it's fair to say that there has never been a national care service. There are colleagues in the room today that are doing the best thing they can to manage a pretty flawed system. Nobody at any point before this moment said we want to have a national care service, and so we need to look at everything in your list But the most important thing is we have to involve the public in actually helping us shape what that looks like. And I think that's the most important part of today. And I'm not avoiding your question, I'm just telling you the truth. Prime Minister, I'm afraid I'm being looked at by your staff, which I have to say I still find frightening after 27 years.
You find something frightening?
No,
I don't think it.
I pretend I do anyway. But so I think
everybody.
The point now, if it's okay, is if anybody would like a quick chat with Andy, he's really happy to. But we need to just get up and get moving because we've got cross-party talk. Sorry, Andy. Had to do that.
And I mean, everyone's feeling the Burnham joy at the moment, but at risk of adding to it, he's managed to hit the 11 o'clock and the 10 o'clock with more accuracy than I usually manage. And I've been doing this for almost as long as Baroness Louise Casey has been doing the things she just referred to. And it puts us in a slightly tricky situation. Do you want to talk about the substance or the style? My inbox is currently full of people reviewing their vote from Monday morning on the Burnham Optimism Barometer, and even some I'm going to tell you straight, some very emotional messages from people talking about how hopeful they are feeling as a consequence of listening to Andy Burnham, I think in the context of both substance and style. We'll run through what he said. We'll look at how he said it. We'll look at how you are responding to your first proper look at Andy Burnham in full Prime Minister mode, not campaigning mode, not victory lap mode, but Prime Minister mode, and what you make of it so far.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11. So Louise Casey's review into social care to be expedited, to be hurried up, to be catalysed, to be brought forward. A resurrection of the programme that Andy Burnham had sought to put in place in the final year of Gordon Brown's government. You know, there's a parallel universe, isn't there, where Gordon Brown won the election in 2010. Austerity never happened, and Andy Burnham quite possibly would have introduced the National Care Service for England, which would have seen free personal care for people with the highest needs, move more towards care free for people when they need it. That was abandoned immediately after the 2010 election. Osborne's razor, again, if you're wondering what Osborne's razor is, it is the growing sense that whenever you're looking at something in this country that's gone really, really wrong, the trail of breadcrumbs will lead back to George Osborne, who continues, of course, to lead a life utterly unaffected by his epic failure. And then you've got the cross-party talks. I think Ed Davey will have a heck of a lot to say of interest in this area, not least because of him and his wife and his broader family, and indeed Social Care Network caring for his son. He is going to attend the meeting by Zoom. Kemi Badenoch's busy. I'm not quite sure how she'd process this sort of invitation. I mean, say what you like about Kemi Badenoch, she doesn't exactly come across as a team player, does she? She's sacking her own team at the moment for supporting policies that they campaigned on during the last general election. I'll say that again because I'm not sure she's noticed. She's telling people like Grant Shapps, for example, and don't do the joke, I'll do the joke if I think it's time for the joke, but she's telling people like Grant Shapps, I'll do the joke, and Michael Green and Corinne Stockheath, that he can't run as a Conservative candidate because he still supports net zero, which was the party's position until she became leader. So theoretically, she should sack herself for having supported net zero prior to becoming party leader. But anyway, not exactly a team player. So she's processing at the moment. So we're all going to pull together on this one. It's a bit like a war cabinet. I'm fascinated by war cabinets because you, like me, have lived in a world of febrile politics wherein it's almost impossible to imagine imagine picking a cabinet that involved the best candidates from every party. You know, you'd have a couple of Tories in there, you'd have most of the current Labour cabinet, you'd have Ed Davey in there, 30p Lee Anderson, he'd be there, probably Chancellor, because with his economics he could almost turn water into wine, I think. But it's so anathema to us, isn't it? And yet, that's kind of what he's talking. I think it might be a little bit cynical, the cross-party bit, not least because Kemi Badenoch seems to be incapable of doing anything that doesn't involve sniping and point scoring, apart from the PMQs, the final PMQs for Keir Starmer, which is going to end up being the exception that proved the rule. But it was more than that as a speech, wasn't it? It was the answer to the unexpected question about assisted dying was really strong, because he answered it. He talked about palliative care being such a crucial constituent of that conversation that you cannot really come out in favour or against assisted dying until you're confident that nobody is ever going to do it because they're worried about the quality of care that they'll get when they are terminally ill. He touched on quite a lot of other things regarding the near rather than the distant future, and he spoke very movingly about his own father, and he spoke very persuasively about the failure of 22 previous reviews to deliver. But optimism doesn't butter any parsnips. Convincing oratorical performances do not butter parsnips. I wonder whether we actually deserve a moment just to reflect on what it feels like to watch a Prime Minister who is palpably human, apparently empathetic, and capable of communicating in a way that doesn't make him sound like a robot, a court jester. I don't know how to describe Liz Truss. A city boy like Rishi Sunak, or how do you describe Liz Truss in that context? So you're going back: Keir Starmer robot, Boris Johnson court jester, Rishi Sunak city boy, Liz Truss. I don't know. But anyway, do we take a moment to reflect upon what it feels like to listen to somebody answering questions, trying to answer questions, being honest? A wet lettuce. No, not really, it doesn't work. So phone lines are open for that. 0345 6060 973. What did you think of what you just heard? And if you didn't listen to it, you can listen to other people describing it and responding to it. I'm not going to bend over backwards to accommodate your decisions this morning. The rest of us were listening to the Prime Minister deliver his first major speech on a major policy issue as Prime Minister. It's a moment of national import. Whatever your political loyalties, whatever your political fealties, it matters. And he is addressing an issue that in many ways is tailor-made for him, because number one, it really matters. Number two, he's got history on this front. And number three, if he gets it right, it will be the most extraordinary electoral boost heading into the next general election. And here's the thing, and I'll do it now, I'll get it out there. Here's the thing about Andy Burnham that I can't quite believe I believe. Right? I think I'm going to say this out loud, and you're going to hang it around my neck for the next 3 years and possibly make me regret it. But I think he means it. When he talks about, it was interesting that he singled out the Mail and the Telegraph. He talked a lot, like we do, about how hard it is to have even vaguely sensible or honest conversations in a country where discourse is defined by incredibly bent and biased right-wing media. He singled out the Mail and the Telegraph by name. He thanked migrant workers for looking after his dad. That's a huge shift from where Keir Starmer appeared to have taken the Labour Party. He seems to me to be determined to fix social care because it will make this country a better place to be. He does not seem to me to be determined to fix social care because he thinks it's an election winner. And this is a very personal position. I've explored it a bit in print today, and it's the conversation that I'm having most with myself in my own head, is trying to work out what it is about him that feels different. So, for example, the stuff about working class culture and pubs that you educated me on towards the end of last week and made me realise that just because pubs are shutting and just because they feel like a much less significant part of local communities doesn't mean that they're not still a significant part of a local community. And if you were in Makerfield during that by-election and you were being treated to all of the poison being poured into your ears, it was a perfect constituency for Farage because it's got hardly any immigration and the residents are all quite old. So that is exactly the kind of constituency that Farage historically flourishes in. Where you can tell old people to be frightened of people that they don't know. And it didn't work. And I was trying to work out why it didn't work. And the reason why it didn't work is because people feel that they've lost something, right? They feel something's changed, and it has. And it's changed for economic reasons, it's changed for technological reasons, it's changed for all sorts of reasons. It has their life, as Jonathan Powell explained during a brilliant clip with, not Jonathan Powell, what's his name? The guy that was in the Footlights, with Enoch Powell. It was a guy that did the opera directing. It will come to me in a minute. Jonathan Miller. A brilliant historical clip with Enoch Powell, where Enoch Powell is talking about change. And Jonathan Miller just says, yeah, of course things are changing. But if people like you keep telling everybody that they're changing for the worse because there's so many black and brown faces around, or there's more black and brown faces around, then you poison everything. Timeless little exchange on a TV chat show. I may play it to you before I go home today because it's that good. And so what Burnham did in Makerfield is he acknowledged that people are feeling a sense of loss and a deep sense of change. And he didn't blame it all on immigrants or migration. He just acknowledged it and said he was going to try to fix it. And by doing that, he parks his tanks on Nigel Farage's lawn. But he does so, oh, by the way, for the avoidance of doubt, that's a metaphor. I'm not suggesting for a moment that anybody should park a tank on Nigel Farage's lawn. Can I make that absolutely clear before they report me to the police? When I say parking tanks on lawns, I'm using a well-established figure of speech, an oratorical trope to decide, or rather to describe an act of political engagement. So when Andy Burnham parked his tanks on Nigel Farage's lawn, by giving people an explanation for their feelings that did not involve generating hatred or attacking minorities, he did so accidentally. He wasn't thinking, how do I spike Nigel Farage's guns? Can I make it absolutely clear that I'm not suggesting for a minute that Nigel Farage carries guns around? Even when he says he's going to, he doesn't mean it. No guns. But so please don't report me to the police. When Andy Burnham says that he is understanding and recognising people's problems, he's not doing it to park tanks on Farage's lawn or to spike Farage's guns. He's doing it because he's listening to people and he's trying to address them. I truly think this is true. I'm a human being like you. I just have this job, right? And I have a propensity to hope. And it has been dashed a lot in recent years, and it will probably be dashed again. But right now I'm taking it. I'm taking it. A lot of people in Manchester tell me that they saw this during the pandemic from Andy Burnham. He is doing things, and it's almost impossible to understand this. He is doing things to make this country a better place to be. He's not doing things to make the opposition look bad or to undermine their rhetoric of hatred. That's going to happen as a side effect. That's going to be like a bonus if you care about such things. But when he addresses social care, he understands he has to recognise the importance of foreign workers because it is, frankly, insane not to. Whether you're a Tory, a Labour, or a Lib Dem or a Reform UK, it is, frankly, insane not to recognise the role that foreign workers play in upholding our social care system. So he does that because he knows it to be true. He's not making a point about immigration. He's making a point about human beings and social care. And that's what he's done today. He's laid out a platform, a programme for change, because he genuinely... Look, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm actually quite cynical, right? He really wants to make this country a better place to be. And I can't remember the last politician that I really thought that about. Or let me rephrase that. I can't remember the last Prime Minister that I really thought that about. So, what did you think of that? Actually, that's all. I'm not going to give you caveats and quibbles. What did you think of that? 0345 6060 973. What was in it? What wasn't in it? How it sounded, how it felt, the style, the substance, all of it. All of it. I mean, historically, the curse of O'Brien only really applies to Tory politicians, and it's always a little bit more desperate when you sort of find yourself thinking, well, Matt Hancock looks all right, maybe he's a good guy. Rishi Sunak said all the right things on the steps of Downing Street, then put Suella Braverman back in the Home Office. So I don't think the curse of O'Brien applies to Andy Burnham, not least because he's been around for so long. And, of course, if he'd stayed in health in 2009, we'd have a national care service, and social care would, if not, I mean, there was a very real chance that social care would have been fixed. 0345 6060 973. If you know a lot about social care, what did you think about what he said? And if you don't know a lot about social care, what did you think about how he said it? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's 11:16.
LBC.
The Meal Deal Plus at McDonald's. Bag yourself a mayo chicken or cheeseburger with medium fries, a selected drink, and one of 5 bonus sides, like 4 McNuggets or a mini McFlurry, all for $5.59. Now that's savor satisfaction. From 11 a.m, not on delivery. Includes a selected saver menu burger, medium fries, selected drink, and a selected bonus side. Price and participation may vary.
A message from TfL for drivers and motorcyclists. Before you turn, look around. Is there a cyclist in your path or approaching behind you? You now need to always let them pass before you turn. Follow the highway code to keep everyone safe. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
OK, Laura, from the top.
When your 9-year-old is an unexpected tuber prodigy, and now you want to support her cheek-puffing talent, be a step ahead with Barclays Premier. With personalised financial planning and a dedicated advisor. Barclays, backing your future. Eligibility criteria apply. Investment products and services are provided by Barclays Bank PLC and its subsidiaries. Capital at risk.
Guys, gals and non-binary pals, we're Copperfield, the UK's only breast cancer awareness charity for young people. We educate people on the signs of breast cancer, as when found early, treatments are more effective and survival rates higher. This is your reminder to check your boobs, chest or pecs. Learn how at copperfield.org.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It is 11:18. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Kicking the can down the road again, perhaps, says Mike in Harrow, after 22 reviews. I hope I'm wrong. That was at 10:19, Mike, and I would suggest that possibly by 10:40 you might have changed your position. Do let me know. Morning, James, writes Isaac, and he speaks for many this morning in my inbox. I'd like to revise my Bob from 7 to 8. He's refreshingly good at this, isn't he? Joe takes up this theme. This is what I've decided to do. I think his messaging is great. It really inspires confidence. I think he seems like he's in charge. There's something else where he did that as well. With this nonsense story about Gianni Infantino trying to flog off the World Cup. And someone suggested last night that Keir Starmer would have said, this is a matter for FIFA for about a fortnight. And at the end of that fortnight, he might finally have come out and said, well, obviously, I don't think it's a very good idea. Burnham's in like Flynn. He's in with his studs up straight away. This is an absolutely ridiculous idea. Sadly, he's doing it on the racist social media platform. But, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day, or in, and he's there with a strong opinion and using words like order and decide. I agree, actually, with Joe on that. I mentioned that to Eleanor. This is what I've decided to do, the opposite of dithering. Tony from Wimbledon, I love what the Prime Minister just said. Social care is as unfair as American healthcare. That really sticks. Hard to get past that. I'm not a big fan, says Tony, of his, but that was extremely insightful. John takes up the theme. Listening to the Prime Minister today, I finally, after many months or years, have a feeling of hope and optimism. He's speaking with his brain, not some conjured-up, spin-created, point-by-point grabbing boffins. And Helen writes, this is literally the most positive, heartwarming and encouraging speech and Q&A session that I have ever heard from any Prime Minister, ever, in capital letters. I had my reservations about Burnham, says John, who's also in Leeds. And, of course, I'm still of the view that the proof will be in the pudding, but by God, he's better than Starmer at this. He can engage and talk so much more freely off the cuff. He doesn't seem like he's constantly startled. That's deeply unfair. I mean, it's accurate. It's just unfair that it is accurate, if you see what I mean. It's not Starmer's fault that he is built the way that he's built, but sadly it matters. Martin writes, and again he speaks for many, is James actually getting paid for today's slot? What an easy gig. To which the answers are, variously, Martin, yes and hell yes. I've never messaged the show before, but Andy Burnham's speech inspired me and moved me. I have a mum with Alzheimer's, and this is beautiful, Nassar. If we were all a little bit more like you, then the country Andy Burnham dreams of delivering would, I think, edge slightly closer. Listen to this. Tell me this isn't humanity in its purest form. I have a mum with Alzheimer's, and I hope it can deliver, if not in time for her, then for somebody else's mum. Blumenek, says Jordan in Devon, he's good. He's so good how he politely and subtly gives the media a little jab and asks them to stop with the point scoring in a way that you can't get angry at. There's no malice there, no rage. He's just politely asking them to stop with the rubbish. Jordan doesn't add that I, James, could probably learn a bit from that approach. He's the kind of PM, says William, that you'd want to take home to your mum. And Zena closes this little cavalcade of compliments with, Burnham is thoroughly decent, isn't he? Was an emotional listen. Oh, go on, I'll squeeze in one more. Please just tell James that I love him. He's just managed to express, as he so often does, my exact thoughts on this subject. 22 after 11 is the time. Teresa is in Rochester. Teresa, what did you make of that?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Look, Andy spoke with warmth and humanity, and he's obviously touched lots of listeners and me as well, with a 97-year-old mum who's got vascular dementia, and locally on the council responsibility for running adult social care.
Oh, gosh.
So I feel immensely encouraged by this. It's a long time coming. Things have changed a lot and got worse since Andy was in government. But the fact that he's now, refreshing that and speaking to what families all over the country feel, that this is an incredibly important issue that touches everyone's lives at some point. So that's a good thing.
Why has it got worse? I mean, or rather, drawing on your expertise, how has it got worse since he was... since he literally announced a plan to fix social care in 2009?
Three things have happened, James. Austerity happened, which tore the guts out of the services. People are living longer, but they need to be able to live well and as independently as possible. And costs have spiralled, particularly since the trust crash, but even before then. And the number of people coming in is rising all the time. And I do, always want to say, remember, we're not just looking after older people.
No, I know.
We're looking after younger people of working age who have got lifetime disabilities and other problems.
Well, that's half of the budget.
Like mental health problems, absolutely.
I don't know what it is in Medway, but it probably reflects the national picture, does it? It's half of the budget, and yet, Burnham did acknowledge this today. He did address it, but I'm afraid I haven't in the past. I've always talked about social care as if it is exclusive to the elderly, and particularly people with dementia.
So Andy Burnham is being courageous and telling the truth as it is. But look, let me tell you what I'm doing. We've borrowed a very large amount of money to build a new care home that the council will run, because that's a way to manage the market and show a gold standard. Our care home is going to be big and beautiful. There will be complex dementia residential. There will be therapeutic and respite and beds to enable people to recover when they come out of hospital, a big training facility, lovely gardens, and recognition that adult social care is part of economic life, where people work and deserve to have decent jobs with good pay and prospects.
Yeah, very good. I mean, I don't know if you have ambitions to extend your political career beyond Medway Council, but you and this isn't a criticism, it's a bit cheeky perhaps, but you sounded like peak politician there. It was delivered fluently and clearly and powerfully. What if you... This is a thing that really interests me. You may not have a view on it, so don't feel obliged to respond. It really matters that he's been away for a while, because he's coming back to Westminster and he's almost going, guys, why haven't we tried to do what? Because you get, is it groupthink? Is that the right phrase, when you just sort of look around and think, well, everybody else thinks this is impossible, so it must be. And he's come back refreshed. I don't know quite what the word is, but he seems to be sincere in his befuddlement at the stagnation of Westminster.
Yeah, that's right, because he's been in an environment where he's been able to do things differently and work with lots of different people from different parts of the community. Mayors are in a position to do that. We haven't got one in Kent, but look, there are council leaders like me who are trying to reach out to everybody. It might sound like Pete or Petra politician, but I have to say that. I have to say that every single day.
Of course,
I have to say that every single day because people need to believe that it's happening. The spades
and this is
ground.
and this is why I'm afraid of my my self-editing, my what would you call it, my optimism guards. My optimism guardrail has fallen down a bit. It won't stay down. I have to get it back up again. It goes with the job, but that's why, because he is talking as if, and I keep coming back to this point, he is talking as if he is much more interested in delivering results that will improve. And I think this is probably more true of local politicians, councillors and the like, more obviously true. It's all about delivering for the people in your constituencies, for the people in your areas, and in the Prime Minister's case, for the people in your country, and not yet, and he may change, about scoring points or settling scores. And some politicians, of course, are the polar opposite of that. No prizes for guessing which politician is complaining that he hasn't been invited to the cross-party talks, despite no longer being an MP, which means he can't be invited to the cross-party talks anyway. No prizes at all for guessing who that might be. Thank you, Teresa. Joy is in Pewsey. Joy, what would you like to say?
Cool. I'm afraid my phone isn't working very well, so the volume is very quiet. So if I don't hear you, please forgive me. But I just had to call in because I've been a full-time carer for my mum for nearly, it was 12 years altogether. I gave up my business, my home, my life, and I moved to another part of the world, country rather, and I looked after her full-time with some help from two amazing carers who supported me with that. But by the time my mum died, I ended up with a dreadful autoimmune condition, and I now myself am really chronically disabled and in lots of pain, not very well at all. And I believe that sort of was a catalyst of all the stress I had during that time, which also I have to say, if you are an unpaid carer, you're supposed to get a small allowance from the government every week. But if your person you're caring for claims attendance allowance, then there's no point claiming it because they take it off her allowance. So to protect my mum's money, I never claimed the allowance I should have got, even though it wasn't very much.
Yes.
So when I heard Andy Burnham's speech this morning, I didn't just cry, I literally sobbed. I've just pulled myself together. I have been nearly hysterical because it touched me so deeply. I felt this guy really gets it. He really, really gets it. It was just so refreshing. And when I heard him answer the questions, he answered all the questions. He didn't deflect at all. And I just wanted to.
Well, thank you.
That.
Thank you for that. What would? Can I be the devil's advocate? Do you mind? I don't want to upset you. What would you say in response to people who might be suggesting that they've heard other politicians say very similar things before?
I think what he's saying is different because what other politicians have said before is that you, the person who's going to need the care, is going to have to give up a percentage of your house or whatever, or your children will lose the inheritance tax. And I think and I think the margins are very low. So say it's 23,000 is not much if you're disabled and living on a pension. You need that money for repairs and stuff like that. But I think this is different because he's looking at a way in which everybody contributes, not just the people who need care. So everybody contributes a little, and so everybody gets care without feeling they have to give up everything.
And that's the difference. I mean, that's the historic sell, isn't it? That's the big sell, always, the big challenge. I mean, in many ways, it's the fundamental divide at the heart of Western politics, in that he will. The original plan back in 2010 when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, and they were both running out of road in terms of holding high office, I think it was 10%. They called it a death tax. The Tories called it a death tax. It was going to be 10% on estates above a certain size that would go into a pot from which everybody could then be reassured of free social care. But of course, if you don't need it, and they just took 10%. If your mum didn't need it, and they've just taken 10% out of what she's leaving for you, that those are the people who historically are very easy to persuade to be aggrieved, aren't they?
Yeah, but the one good thing I think about this, if he does manage to get some sort of cross-party consensus, I think that's the thing that's different. If that can be written into law, that the next people that come into Parliament can't change it, because that's the trouble where things just get going and then people get voted out and the next one comes in and throws it all away.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Boris Johnson, which of course is always important to be, but the things he put in place never really got properly, or the things he tried to put in place never really got properly tested or examined, because subsequent prime ministers didn't carry on with his programmes. I guess it would be chiefly Rishi Sunak. I think I'm remembering that correctly. Joy, thank you. I mean, in many ways, the question would be, in a normal circumstances, the question would be, why do you believe him when he says stuff and not believe others when they say the same stuff? But I think Joy kind of shot that fox. I think that the key here, it's a phrase I've used actually in the paper today, is that he gets it. And I mean, you can't really argue with that. You can say, no, he doesn't. You can argue with it like that, but you can't argue with the people who think that he does. You can't tell them that they don't feel that. I want to phrase this correctly. You can't tell. So if I say the thing that I'm finding most extraordinary about Andy Burnham at the moment, partly probably as a consequence of the years he spent away from Westminster, is that he is describing things with a kind of an uncommon clarity that he couldn't see back in 2010. He's gone away and he's come back and he's gone, well, why aren't we doing this? Why do we allow these newspapers to set the conversational tone? Why do we spend all our lives? I know it sounds a little naive or idealistic on my part, but I think he gets something about pubs, oddly, and about communities. And you can't tell me that I don't think that. You can tell me that you don't think he does, but you can't tell me that I don't think what I think. And that is what I think his early success is going to depend on. How many people like me and like our last caller, how many people just think he gets it? Simon English is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:36 is the time. Here's a question for you. Why is Chris Philp pretending that France has declared war on him? I don't know if you're aware of this story from yesterday, but Chris Philp was doing some hate tourism in the English Channel. It's quite popular. It's normally kind of the people who go around hanging flags on your lampposts, even if you politely ask them not to. But they all like to get in boats and float around, filming themselves, shouting at migrants if they happen to encounter any, but I mean, it is just sort of the worst and the most cynical kind of social media creation. And Chris Philp was doing it yesterday, and a French warship nearby, gunshots were heard coming from this French warship nearby. And Chris Philp has essayed this into an extraordinary claim that they were deliberately targeting him, the former immigration minister, in a country where small boats crossings have gone down by about 45% this year so far. They were deliberately targeting him for being such a brilliant politician and causing them such trouble. Well, why on earth would Chris Philp be trying to distract attention away from other things that Chris Philp has done in this area this week? I think this might qualify as a misinformation, and I will share the details with you shortly. But if I were to do a text vote, it would probably be something along the lines of, do you think the French have declared war on Chris Philp? I mean, hang on, don't report me to the police. I just want to make it absolutely clear. I'm not suggesting that anybody has actually declared war on anybody, but that's kind of a comical reading of what Chris Philp has claimed. But if Chris Philp did go to war against the French, whose side would you be on? If the French declared war on Chris Philp, whose side would you be on? Anyway, I think I know what happened yesterday, and this gives us a wonderful opportunity to try out the new Mystic Jim sting, which is one of my all-time favourites. We're not doing it yet, Keith. You can relax. But I'm gonna offer up a theory on what I think actually happened yesterday, and events may transpire that I'm right. We may never know whether I'm right or wrong. It may get demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that I'm wrong, or I may be proved right, in which case the Mystic Jim credentials become even more enhanced. So we're looking at that, but we're also looking at misinformation about why he is behaving so oddly and claiming that the French have declared war on him and him personally, because I think I know. 11:38 is the time. But back to Andy Burnham and his speech and his first real performance, if that's the right word, as a Prime Minister. A first policy-based performance as Prime Minister. Not a soundbite, not a social media clip, not a flying visit, but a set-piece speech, a policy announcement, Q&As from the media, and I'm wondering what you made of it. Alfie is in Lambeth. Alfie, did I say that correctly? Alfie, what would you like to say?
Yes, hi there, James.
Hello.
Yes, I wanted to say, I thought it was a very good speech. He orates very well. He's very empathetic. It's very personal. But I think he's in the sort of unique position at the moment because he has been sort of out of the mainstream for for a while. He's able to kind of do that, whereas further down the line, what's going to happen when he has to actually say what he's going to have to do?
You've read my mind, because I said to Joy and Pusey a moment ago that being away, I think it was Joy, maybe it was the caller before, but being away from the fray has given him this ability to see things with a new clarity. But what if it's the other way around? And what if all the people who are sort of enmeshed in the quagmire of process are right? And he's going to end up in a year or two down the line, he's going to end up returning to being like them and thinking, I don't know why I bother, it's impossible to get anything done in this flipping country.
Yes, because I think, like they said, there's been 22 reviews. It's not just Andy Burnham on his own. There's a whole team behind him. And I'm just interested to know, well, what's new? What new is going to come out of this? What difficult? Because let's face it, they're going to have to be difficult decisions.
Yes. And it's going to involve taking money from somewhere, and somewhere means someone, and someone might be you, it might be me, it will probably be me.
I mean, I recently did have to put my mum in a care home, and it has absolutely shocked me, the price of this. Yes. And we did have to sell her home because you get caught in a catch-22 situation, because if you can't afford to pay, if you don't have enough savings to pay for the care at home, the only way you can pay for it is to sell the home. And the money won't last. It'll last a couple of years. And, that's that. And it's an awful situation for anybody to have to be in. But that money to pay for that is going to have to come from somewhere. And he has some great ideas, but no, with the defence, with welfare, all these things, but they are going to have to be paid for.
And that is when the warm glow of optimism and hope may begin to fade quickly rather than slowly. Yes. I mean, I know the answer to one of your questions, because this is what he suggested in 2009-10 when he announced his National Care Service, and the Tories called it a death tax. The idea would be to take money from every estate and put it in a pot from which the people who need social care would then draw, as opposed to this extraordinary lottery now, which the tax expert Dan Needle described as, putting a deck of cards on the wall and giving a monkey at some darts and throwing the dart and, hitting a figure. And people like you have to find £60,000-70,000 a year, and someone over there is never going to have to find anything, despite they're the same age and they've paid the same taxes, they've lived the same life. I mean, there's a fundamental fairness to what the Telegraph journalist called compulsory insurance. Every estate chips in, only the people who need social care take out, and the costs are met. That is what he would say if he were here 16 years ago, but it's not quite what he said now.
No, and I think just thinking about it 20, 30 years down the line, my mum obviously it's unlikely she'll be able to pass on inheritance. Then the impact that has on me, the ability for younger people to buy houses, all of those kind of things. It's like, well, where is this sort of care pot? The state are going to have to pay for it down the line at some point. So it's not just about
how do you feel then?
Couple of years.
How do you feel about that idea? The Tories will call it a death tax. The Daily Mail will have a fit of the vapours. I mean, I can't work out. Perhaps you can help me with this. I can't work out why the 4th Viscount Rothermere, who inherited his newspaper empire and a huge sum of money from the 3rd Viscount Rothermere, who inherited his newspaper empire and a huge sum of money from the 2nd Viscount Rothermere, who I think inherited his newspaper. I may have counted incorrectly, but you get the picture. Why do you think he might be passionately opposed to inheritance tax?
I mean, possibly because it's a percentage, so the more you have, the more you pay. I don't know.
So how would you feel about a percentage of all estates going into a pot from which social care was funded?
I don't think I would mind, actually, to be honest.
No,
I mean,
that's the challenge.
My view on what's happening at the moment and all the sound bites are coming up. Sometimes I wish they would just put up income tax and rather than death by 1,000 taxes.
Keep it simple, keep it straight. Well, I think, if I remember correctly, and it was a long time ago, that is pretty much what was in place on this, not to income tax, but a specific premium, a specific insurance premium, if you like, which is what tax is in a way. All taxes, in a sense, are insurance premiums because you're paying into a pot for lots and lots of things, some of which you will not need. You will not need to take out. People who don't have children pay for our education system. And of course they benefit from other people's children being educated, but they don't actually get the measurable cash-based benefit themselves. So I think that's what they'll have to do, which is why I said that I suspect the cross-party talks bit is a little bit tongue-in-cheek or cynical from Andy Burnham, because Kemi Badenoch has already made it clear that she wants all the things that he wants to do, but she doesn't think that any money should be provided to pay for them, except presumably by cutting the welfare bill. That's generally all they have, these people. But I don't think that Kemi Badenoch at the moment would go along with the idea of a fair insurance-ish system where everybody pays a certain percent, every estate pays a certain percentage, and that pot is the one from which anybody and everybody who needs social care would be assured of free care. 11:46 is the time. I like that, but then I'm a naive fool. It's 11:46.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 11:49. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where there's quite a lot going on. I'm minded in the next hour to talk about political discourse and how would you describe it? Ill-advised interventions from political figures. Zach Polanski, last night on the telly, the leader of the Greens, refused to apologise for posting a picture of a man in a T-shirt that featured a guillotine and the words, "We're making plans for Nigel," a quote from an XTC song. But I think obviously intended to make people think of Nigel Farage. And Nigel Farage has called the police, I think. He's very, very upset about this, very frightened, and many of his colleagues are describing it as incitement to murder. I'm interested in whether Polanski should have apologised. I mean, it's not as if there are any sort of senior reform councillors who've called for Labour MPs to actually be shot during that. What there is? What, a senior reform councillor calling for an actual Labour, sharing a social media post calling for an actual MP to be shot? Well, Nigel Farage probably called the police on his own councillor on that one then. I think that saying this person should be shot is measurably more insightful than a T-shirt featuring a guillotine and someone's name. So we're going to look at that story, because I like elements of it, but we're also going to have the words of Michelle Obama playing in the background. Not literally, Keith, relax. We're going to have the words of Michelle Obama playing in the background when she said, "When they go low, we go high," because looking at the state of the United States of America, that didn't work, did it? So I'm wondering whether part of Zach Polanski's motivation in refusing to apologise, because Nigel Farage never apologises for anything, is to reject the idea that you have to be better than them. I don't know what I think about that. I don't really care what I think about it. I can't wait to find out what you think about it. But I'm currently busy finding out what you think about Andy Burnham's speech this morning. And Wendy's in Norwich. Wendy, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. We talked before about measles and vaccinations a few months ago.
Yes,
anyway, we'll move on to this the other end of the age group.
Yes.
Mostly, apart from the younger ones. So it's a slightly different look at this. I like the two words Andy said, preventative and front end. And I think I'm just going to talk. If I can,
you're a retired GP, I think. Quite recent. Well, you were recently retired last time we spoke. I don't know when we dropped the word recently from that description.
March.
Well, it's still recently then. Recently retired, yes.
So recently retired GP. Also, my mother had Parkinson's disease and was in 3 care homes. And I've got 3 tax-paying children in their 20s and 30s. So that's where I stand. But I'd just like to sort of describe what it's like as a GP going into care homes, which I did virtually every week, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And also my practical solution to it, if I can. So the two things that happen in care homes is that falls happen in the middle of the night. So someone with severe dementia who can't feed themselves, is incontinent, all the rest, falls over in the middle of the night or falls out of bed. And of course, it's 999 immediately. However much the relatives can say, please don't do that. We just wait till the morning, give them pain relief. No, it's 999. And chest infections is the other thing. Antibiotics given to people all the time when they've got a bit of a cough. Severe dementia people. So we had a resident who was semi-conscious with a neurological disease for 8 years. And we get in there and they said, he's coughing again. Can you write up the antibiotic? That was what was going on all the time. It was really defensive medicine. And ask the public, would they really wish to live like this with the people that have got very severe dementia? Most people would say no if they just went to visit a care home. It's not criticising any staff or anything like that. Do you want to live like that? And I think some people might say yes, they would want everything and all that. But most people, I believe, would say no. And I've got a power of attorney myself, and my 89-year-old mother-in-law also has a health and welfare power of attorney with specific wording in it, which is not the blunt instrument, which is assisted dying.
Right.
It says, if I was incapacitated in such a way I was unable to care for myself or communicate, I would not want to receive life-prolonging treatment. And that includes antibiotics or be resuscitated, but would wish to receive best possible care to keep me comfortable. So my argument is that I think people need to be thinking way ahead on this, and the government needs to be thinking way ahead and doing that sensitive communication to the public before we get to the stage when we've got incapacity.
So his answer then was... It's a strange phrase for me to use given the seriousness of the conversation that we're having, but Andy Burnham's answer to that unexpected question was impressive, was music to your ears.
Yes, towards the end. I mean, there was a lot of describing the horrendous current situation.
Of course.
But the simplicity of, we just all got to pay more tax and pay more into the system when people are living in such a way that I don't believe people would want to live. But relatives have a very difficult situation. They go in and say, can you not give my mother antibiotics this time? And there's a staff sort of, no, we've got to, because there's nothing written down anywhere by that person that's what they would have wanted. It's a very delicate situation. But they do this in the States. I spoke to a doctor who's in the States, and it's an awful system there, obviously. But they do have direct conversations with their physician, as they call it, about what they will be when they've got no capacity, if and when. I mean, they might have it, won't they? But if they have not got capacity, which many of us won't have, make that difficult conversation. But my idea, which is slightly, maybe sounds a bit crackpot, but the government should write to everybody aged 60 a letter with a really difficult, very careful communication saying there's no compulsion, and obviously the media would get very excited about this, but can you consider writing an advance directive? So you've got it in writing. It's a clear wording that's done by lawyers, actually. And lots of people have got them, but many people haven't.
Right.
And that makes it so much simpler when it comes to looking after you when you've got dementia. Because you look after them, but you don't keep sending them into hospital, and you've got this pressure to prescribe antibiotics to keep them alive all the time.
I understand what you're saying, and I understand why you suggest that there would be uproar in some areas, because if I've understood you correctly, you're talking about the system currently trying too hard to keep alive people whose quality of life is massively diminished.
Yes,
right.
And it's not playing God, because that person...
No, I understand.
way ahead have decided that that's not what they would be.
That's a tricky conversation to have, isn't it? And yet it's probably a really important one.
Yes.
And you've had it. You've thought about it because of what you've done in your professional life.
Yes.
Which is just presumption that it is, it's almost undoing elements of the Hippocratic Oath, isn't it?
But the Hippocratic Oath don't do any harm, and you could argue it's doing harm to someone by keep treating them.
Yeah.
Treating them and treating them and treating them. So, so it's not really first do no harm.
They should get you on this panel. Louise Casey, I'll give her your number if you want. I think that's a huge part.
I would really like to be on it because I just feel that it's got to be done way ahead of anyone having any illness.
Because that was what he said right at the outset. He talked about the numbers going up, didn't he? More and more people coming into elderly social care.
We won't be able to afford it. No.
And you're not, we're not motivated by a desire to keep the numbers down. We're just acknowledging that one of the reasons for the numbers being so high is probably an anachronistic approach to healthcare and an outdated approach to longevity. I don't know. I've not thought about it this way before, so I'm not going to offer up an opinion on the subject until I've had time to think about it a lot more. But you express the idea in such calm and compassionate ways that you manage to strip it of some of the emotional baggage that it will inevitably involve. And you make it sound pragmatic as well. I can tell you as well that there is an extraordinary response as you've spoken. Wonderful caller, James. I'm currently getting this in place for myself. This caller is amazing, James. I totally agree with this lady, says Zoe in Basingstoke. Please thank this caller, says Peter. This woman is spot on, says Amanda. I don't normally get that kind of response in my inbox to a kind of healthcare policy contribution. but there it is. That's what you got. And it's yours, not mine, so take it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. It's 11:58. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Let me squeeze in one more call if I can. John's in Bristol. John, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello, John.
I'd like to say that Andy's speech this morning and your phone-in has touched me more than I ever thought it might do, actually.
Okay, take your time.
My dad is in a care home. He has vascular dementia and Alzheimer's. It was diagnosed just over a year ago. And obviously diagnosis took a while, so we feel he's had it for a long time.
Yeah.
My mum died suddenly last September.
I'm sorry.
She was, thank you. She was his primary carer with some help each day at the end and the start of the day. So as soon as she was in hospital, we had to find care for Dad. He's in an absolutely wonderful place.
Yeah.
The carers look after him so well. Whatever they are paid, it's not enough. And there was a caller earlier that said about this is too late for now. This is needs to be coming, and yes. I couldn't agree more with that. Whatever comes in from the government, whatever silly buggers happens in terms of whatever it ends up like,
yes.
That will be too late for my dad. But it's something that we need to address. He was unfortunately in hospital over the weekend. He managed to dislocate his hip in his sleep. This happens. And we had to wait outside A&E for 4 hours in the ambulance. Then when we got into A&E, there was another 6-hour wait before we were properly seen. And then they managed to, under sedation, put his hip back in. Then another 12-hour wait in a corridor before he was able to get to the discharge lounge, which I have to say is more discharge than lounge, and before getting back to the care home. We were the lucky ones. In that instance, there were people there in the corridors that quite obviously had dementia, that were there on their own, confused as to what was going on, there for hours and hours and hours, and who knows what the care package was like for them to get home. It's a big problem,
and it's not one of the things that Burnham addressed today, is it? It's you and Wendy have brought it into this conversation towards the end, and yet it's a huge part of any prospective solution, I think.
It is, and it seemed to me today that Andy Burnham gets it.
Yeah.
He touches me. He's got a dad with dementia that I have and understands. He sees it.
Well, he's the same, John. And his voice went a bit towards the end of that speech, I thought, just as your voice is going a bit now, because it's our dads, you know. It's our parents that we're talking about, and the idea of them suffering unnecessarily is unbearable, isn't it? Unbearable.
And it is, and it is, as I spoke to you, the producer, it's not about the money for me. You know, my inheritance is knowing that he's being cared for now.
That's a beautiful thing, and I hope I am like you. I think I am, and I hope I never have to find out as it goes. But I also have sympathy for people who do a kind of calculation in their head and find themselves thinking that it's not fair for me to pay something that I don't use. I don't agree with that position, and it makes a mockery of universal taxation, and it is, as Andy Burnham pointed out earlier, absurd that the NHS and social care have somehow been detached from each other when they are obviously part of an identical process. But I just acknowledge not everybody is as clear-eyed and as kindly as you are, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong-uns. It is 2 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Gosh, amazing calls once again. I'm going to change the picture completely next. The leader of the Green Party has been accused of all manner of evil deeds by posting accidentally, by his account, a picture of a bloke in a T-shirt featuring a picture of a guillotine and the words, "We're making plans for Nigel." And Nigel Farage has an article in the Daily Mail today talking about how horrible this experience has been for him and reminding us of the ongoing court case. So there's a limit to what I can say, but the recent death of Anne Widdecombe in apparently horrible circumstances. He mentions that many times in the article about the T-shirt. And the idea that Zach Polanski should have taken the opportunity to apologise on Newsnight last night is one that in and of itself isn't very interesting or important, but in the broader sphere of political hypocrisy and political discourse, should you apologise to people who would never apologise in the same circumstances? It's a moral question that goes far beyond Zach Polanski and Nigel Farage, and I want to know your thoughts after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 7 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are going to have a conversation next, which I must confess I'm a tiny bit confused by. Not like massively confused, but a tiny bit confused. And it's important not to overlook the possibility that the recent death of Anne Widdecombe has completely changed people's opinions and personalities about political discourse. So we should get that out there early. And we should also acknowledge that, really, if you're going to have an attitude to inappropriate language in politics, then you have to apply it equally to all politicians, or at least to all parties. You can't have two-tier policing of language. You can't sort of say, well, it's okay for someone from my party to do this, but it's absolutely awful when somebody from the other party, when somebody from the other lot does that. You can't, I mean, two-tier policing, of course, doesn't exist in the contexts that a lot of racists are currently claiming. It does exist in the context of almost every police service in the country routinely being found to treat people of colour measurably worse than white people. But anti-white racism is the lie currently being perpetrated by some people. There are, however, valid concerns about two-tier policing of language now. Almost as if some people seem to think that the rules should be different for them and their colleagues than they are for everybody else. And this has been brought into the... and the odd bit about all of the stuff that we're about to talk about now is that for the last few years, the whole narrative of hurty words and free speech and you should be able to say what you want, that has all been amplified and disseminated by people who are Nigel Farage or very adjacent to Nigel Farage, whether it's colleagues or fans or members of the media that dedicate significant portions of their careers to tickling his toes. This idea that free speech or Or, as it is often in these cases, the right to be racist must be protected at all costs. Culminated, of course, in one woman being offered a hero's welcome at the Reform UK Party conference after pleading guilty to incitement to racial hatred. We may get to her shortly, because it is in this context that Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party, has come in for some criticism. Now, it's important to remember exactly what it was that Zach Polanski did. He posted a bunch of pictures taken at a Green Party event by a photographer without, according to him and his account, without looking at them properly. And it turned out that one of them featured a man in a T-shirt with a picture of a guillotine and the words, "We're making plans for Nigel." And that is actually the end of that story. That's what happened. He when it was brought to his attention, he took it down. A spokesman said that he condemned it, but he didn't apologise. I said yesterday that he had apologised. Being a brilliant radio presenter, I very quickly corrected myself. But I presumed that a condemnation goes hand in hand with an apology. This is one of the reasons why I find the question I'm going to ask you in 5 minutes so interesting. So he condemned it, but he didn't specifically apologise. And he was given an opportunity to do so last night on the telly on 3 occasions. Here's one of them.
Well, if I'd done it deliberately, I'd be apologising. But because this was a mistake, I think the important thing is that I point out it's a mistake, that I also make sure that I condemn political violence. And also, crucially, I make a commitment to be better on my social media.
OK. Do you want to apologise then or not?
No. The reason for that is because Nigel Farage, when I posted this, or when the person posted it, it got less than 1,000 likes. Nigel Farage then took it, cropped it, so it made it look like I posted it, which I think was fundamentally dishonest. It's now had 3.2 million views. So actually, this whole conversation has been seen more because Nigel Farage, the Yusuf, and I think Richard Tice posted it. So I'm accepting my responsibility in that I shouldn't have accepted that collaboration. I'm accepting that we all need to condemn political violence. But I also think the reporting to the police, the ramping up of the language to say this is incitement to murder me, feels like that's also putting me in a dangerous spot.
That's really interesting. And it may slightly change the opinion that I thought I had at this time yesterday. I didn't know those numbers. Did you know those numbers? So if him posting it and it having, was it 100,000? Was it 1,000 or 100,000 views? He posted it and it had a relatively small number of views. And then Farage and his mates posted exactly the same photograph and it got millions. If the photograph itself is insightful, if it is inciting murder, who's done more inciting? The person whose social media activity secured 1,000 or 100? Let's listen to it again, actually. I want to get my numbers right. Here you go. So this is him explaining why he won't apologise.
Well, if I'd done it deliberately, I'd be apologising. But because this was a mistake, I think the important thing is that I point out it's a mistake, that I also make sure that I condemn political violence. And also, crucially, I make a commitment to be better on my social media.
OK. Do you want to apologise then or not?
No. The reason for that is because Nigel Farage, when I posted this, or when the person posted it, it got less than 1,000 likes. Nigel Farage then took it, cropped it, so it made it look like I posted it, which I think was fundamentally dishonest. It's now had 3.2 million views. So actually, this whole conversation has been seen more because Nigel Farage, the Yusuf, and I think Richard Tice posted it. So I'm accepting my responsibility in that I shouldn't have accepted that collaboration. I'm accepting that we all need to condemn political violence. But I also think the reporting to the police, the ramping up of the language to say this is incitement to murder me, feels like that's also putting me in a dangerous spot.
13 minutes after 12 is the time. So, I mean, that's maths, right? If I did something on social media and it got 1,000 hits and it was a really bad thing to do, and then you did something with exactly the same picture and it got 3.2 million hits, who's done the more damage? Who's done... No? I don't know. It's just a question. I'm just asking questions. Because what about if you posted a picture of an MP and it's of a female MP and it said, "You dozy cow should be shot"? What if you posted that? Because that's what one of Nigel Farage's colleagues did. That is exactly what, word for word, with a picture of the Labour MP for Bolsover, Natalie Fleet. That is what, I think he's the deputy leader of Lancashire Council, actually did. County Councillor Simon Evans did this on Facebook. You dozy cow, my apologies for the language here, but I'm just reading out what the Reform UK councillor did on social media, should be shot. Now, he subsequently took the post down, apologised for it, and said that he did not notice the offensive text. Reform said the party had investigated, but it was agreed it was a genuine mistake and no further action was necessary. So, you dozy cow should be shot, genuine mistake, no further action necessary. T-shirt, guillotine, Nigel, genuine mistake, call the police. I'm just wondering whether that sounds a little bit two-tier to you. Let's refresh our memory about a story that we touched on yesterday.
I suggest we listen to them and not the overpaid pen pushers in Whitehall who are not doing a neutral job, and once Brexit's done, we'll take the knife to them, all right? Had enough of all of it.
We'll take the knife to them, had enough of all of it. Now, I don't know whether you think he meant that. He was actually going to turn up in Whitehall with a knife and start stabbing people. But, I mean, he believes that a bloke wearing a T-shirt with a guillotine on it is actively encouraging people to, I don't know, build a guillotine and then somehow drag him to it and chop his head off? I genuinely, if that's why, unless you're wasting police time, you must genuinely believe that a bloke with a picture of a guillotine on his T-shirt is threatening decapitation, whereas a bloke standing up in public and saying he's going to take a knife to some human beings is not threatening to take a knife to some human beings. Of course, subsequently, he said he should have used the word axe. He should have changed the language to use the word axe. But again, we find ourselves wondering what the difference is here. Farage defended the remark as a metaphor for staffing cuts. He tweeted, "I should have said, take the axe," which is a more traditional term for cuts. I mean, knives, guns, this fella's got the lot.
If they don't deliver this Brexit that I spent 25 years of my life working for, then I will be forced to don khaki, pick up a rifle and head for the front line.
Don khaki, pick up a rifle and head for the front line. Now, I don't know whether you hear that and think that he was realistically threatening to dress up in a slightly different outfit from his usual clothes and get a gun from undisclosed sources and go out and start shooting people. Most obviously, I think Theresa May, because it was her job at the time to deliver the Brexit that he was talking about. Do you think that he meant that he was going to stab civil servants? Do you think that he meant that he was going to shoot Theresa May? Or do you think that he was using figures of speech? And remember, Zach Polensky wasn't wearing this T-shirt with the guillotine on it. He was simply posting a picture of it in a tranche of photographs that had been provided by a photographer. So I suppose that consistency demands that Nigel Farage should have phoned the police, should have called the police on himself at least twice, and indeed on Councillor Simon Evans, the deputy leader of Lancashire County Council. A spokesman for Mr Farage said his words were out of context and it would be unfair. Taking the words out of context would be unfair, and insisted that the party was opposed to any type of violence. Which again sounds a little bit two-tier, doesn't it? If a T-shirt is incitement to murder and the police should be involved, but threatening to shoot people is being taken out of context and expressing opinions that are opposed to any... I mean, I don't quite see how one is worse than the other unless you're engaging in two-tier policing of political language. And we know how much Nigel Farage hates two-tier policing, don't we? I'm up to 3 examples of just how epic this hypocrisy is. But I've got 10.
James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 12. Now, just for the avoidance of doubt, I still think Zach Polanski should have apologised, even though he did it by mistake. The purpose of this conversation is to highlight the hypocrisy of some of the contributors to this discourse, but also to tee up your answers to that question. Because Polanski's rationale for not apologising is the alleged disingenuousness and hypocrisy of the person he's being asked to apologise to, Nigel Farage. And I don't think anyone can really argue with the allegation of disingenuousness and hypocrisy, given that we're only up to 3 examples, and he's already failed to condemn a senior councillor who called for or shared a social media post literally calling for a Labour MP to be shot, threatening to stab civil servants, and threatening to shoot people who opposed his Brexit dreams. That's just 3 examples of his public conduct. I've got another one happened in this studio, actually. You will remember when the little girls in Southport were murdered, and it felt at the time as if every racist on the planet was taking to social media to tell lies about it and to try to whip up hatred and indeed incite violence against refugees or asylum seekers or immigrants in general or foreigners. Quite why you would want to be violent towards somebody who had absolutely nothing to do with the thing that has got you upset, unless you've been successfully groomed or gaslit by race provocateurs, remains beyond me. But some people got stuck in and chose to, to either believe the utterly unsourced rantings of deeply unpleasant people and share them with their huge followings, or they pretended to believe the utterly unsourced rantings of deeply unpleasant people and share them with their huge followings. I don't know why you would do that, but I do know that I wasn't the first person to suggest that those riots that followed those hideous murders should have been called the Farage riots, because many, many, many people who took to the streets and enacted violence or threatened violence or witnessed or enjoyed violence seemed to be dancing to a tune that was set by the social media activity of, I say, the usual suspects. It was Tom Swarbrick who put it to Nigel Farage that he had been part of this problem.
One of the reasons the Southport riots were as bad as they were is we weren't told the truth. There were stories online from some very prominent folks with big followings, Andrew Tate, etc., suggesting the man had crossed the English Channel in a boat in October 2023. Other suggestions that he was an active Muslim. And much of this led to the riots that we saw.
But you amplified that because you said some reports suggest...
I asked a very simple question. Was this person known or not? Now,
to the security services.
Absolutely.
And that's a perfectly legitimate question, which was raised by Yvette Cooper. But, Nigel Farage, you didn't just do that, did you? You said some reports suggest he was known to the security services. Those reports were from a fake news website, amplified by Russian state TV, and, as you mentioned, Andrew Tate. Which ones were you looking at?
Which adds to what I was asking for.
So contributing to a context, that's a good word, they like to use that word a lot, contributing to a context which saw hideous violence unfolding on our streets and saw people living in fear of their lives, and based entirely upon lies that he had helped to spread. It's not because they didn't tell us what was going on that these riots happened, it's because liars told us things that had not happened. And what the fudge is an active Muslim while we're at it? An active... What are you supposed to do with that phrase? Just sort of think negative thoughts about all Muslims? Anyway, Nigel Farage didn't apologise for that, but he's called the police about a T-shirt. And one of the people who responded to the online horror show that accompanied that hideous murder was a woman called Lucy Connolly, who subsequently pleaded guilty to incitement to racial hatred after calling for countless innocent people to be burned alive in their beds. Nigel Farage didn't call the police on her, somebody else did. Instead, he, or his party, invited her onto stage at the Reform UK Party conference to receive this welcome.
Our Planet Normal guest this week has become a living symbol of two-tier Britain. The sheer injustice she has suffered has shocked millions of people across Britain and indeed across the whole world. She's a wonderful mum, wife, beloved childminder, little kids from every corner of the earth she's taken wonderful care of. So I am, of course, referring to Britain's favourite political prisoner. Ladies and gentlemen, please give the warmest of welcomes to Lucy Connolly.
Alison Pearson and Liam Halligan there playing the roles of Ant and Dec in their bizarre X Factor tribute act to a woman who had already been jailed for incitement to racial hatred. Richard Tice responded at the time by saying, "It's wonderful to see her back with us and to hear her direct telling her story. I think that she has a huge opportunity to help reform and help the cause of free speech." Presumably, if Lucy Connolly had posted a picture of somebody else wearing a T-shirt upon which her tweet calling for people to actually be killed in their beds appeared, then they might have had a problem with it, or indeed phoned the police, or reported it to the authorities. So the question I'm going to ask you at the end of this is whether or not Zach Polanski is right, and the context of Nigel Farage's and his party's contributions to public discourse means he shouldn't apologise, coupled with the fact that there were 1,000 hits for the original post on Instagram, sorry, not Twitter, and after Farage and his friends started sharing the same image, the image that is incitement to murder, that figure went up to 3.2 million. I still think he should just apologise, but I'm also reminded that when Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high, it somewhat backfired. Anyway, here's Nigel Farage bigging up the IRA.
Now, it's a bit early in the day, so all I've got actually is coffee, but I hope you enjoy a few pints with the lads tonight. Up the Ra.
Up the Ra. He got paid £87 for that. A celebration of terrorism, murderous terrorism, support of the IRA, the Irish nationalist phrase. He told Mail Online that he didn't realise the meaning of the message, noting that he has had a face-to-face death threat from the IRA. You'd have thought, wouldn't you, that you'd double-check on things before accepting £87 to celebrate them. This one is about Richard Tice, not about Nigel Farage himself, but of course Tice and Zia Yusuf have been joining in the calls for the Green Party leader who shared a picture of a man in a T-shirt featuring a guillotine and the words, "We're making plans for Nigel to face the full force of the law." Do you remember the Reform UK councillor that said, well, I don't need to tell you what he said because this clip will remind you.
One of your new Sunderland councillors, so a man who was elected to represent Reform, suggested melting Nigerians to fill potholes. Is that person who's expressed those views somebody you are happy to see represent Reform?
This weekend, we are celebrating our incredible successes. Like any party, you have internal party processes to look at where people have said or done the wrong thing.
But do you condemn those remarks?
Laura, I condemn anything that is wrong and inappropriate.
So no. And the councillor concerned, Glenn Gibbons, was subsequently reinstated in the party. This is the man who called for Nigerians to be melted down and used to fill in the potholes. Now, listen, it's perfectly possible that you think a picture of a guillotine on a T-shirt accompanied by the words, "We're making plans for Nigel," means that you really are encouraging people to put Nigel Farage on a guillotine, and you would also have to believe that Glenn Gibbons really did want to melt down Nigerians and use them to fill in potholes. So you'd call the police on both of them, right? Wrong. Zia Yusuf, I forget precisely what his made-up job title is, but he's another one who's given lots and lots of money to the party and been given a job description as a consequence. He's very fond of calling opponents of his political party traitors. And I'll tell you how they respond to that allegation after the very latest headlines with Matt Hewitt.
James O'Brien on LBC.
33 minutes after 12 is the time. David Aranovich, a journalist and radio presenter, writes a rather splendid Substack, which this week turned its attention to the horrors or the dangers of using the word traitor casually. It's given me pause for thought, actually, I have to say. And I hope it gives others pause for thought. Here's Zia Youssef, who is a big donor to Nigel Farage's political party and has a job with them, although he's not an MP. Richard Hermer, Labour's Attorney General, has lied to the BBC, claiming Reform wants migrants to drown in the Channel. Hermer used lawfare to hound British troops who had done nothing wrong, in one case pushing him to attempt suicide. He is a traitor to his country. He attacked someone called Robert Jenrick. I can't remember what happened to him. Why are you continuing to lie, Robert? You said your party needs to own up to its mistakes. You are doing the opposite. You're a traitor to your country. There's another one here as well. Starmer's Attorney General Richard Hermer hounded British troops and ruined their lives as a blood sport. Hermer is a traitor to his country. Another one, recent events demonstrate why I view the Tory and Labour politicians who created the burning injustice of modern Britain as traitors to their country. And then he wrote, a reckoning is coming. Now, I don't know. If a T-shirt can be incitement to murder or incitement to violence, a reckoning is coming. Do you reckon? Could that be construed as in any form of incitement? And I'm slightly confused about who he means when he talks about the Tory politicians who created the burning injustice of modern Britain. Do you think he means Robert Jenrick or Suella Braverman or 30p Lee Anderson or Danny Kruger? Or I can't remember any others off the top of my head, but you'd be amazed if you found out what party they're all in now. So we're up to 9 examples of things that perhaps somebody else might have called the police over or demanded an apology. I'll turn your attention next to a character called Wayne Titley, who won the Eccleshall and Nossal division for Reform UK in Staffordshire. He stepped down just 2 weeks after being elected, after it was found that he had shared various posts, including things like why they don't position the Navy so as the big boats leave the shoreline, they intercept them and thunder them back using a volley of gunfire aimed at sinking them. It's worth reminding ourselves that Zia Youssef was calling Richard Hermer a traitor for suggesting that Reform wanted migrants to drown in the Channel. And here is an elected Staffordshire County Councillor from Reform calling for migrants to drown in the Channel. So who are you going to complain about there? Are you going to complain about the bloke who was calling for migrants to drown in the Channel by using a volley of gunfire aimed at sinking them? Or are you going to complain about the senior member of Reform UK arguing that they don't call for migrants to drown in the Channel? Tricky question, that. I'm, of course, as ever, just asking questions. The response of Reform UK to this councillor's decision to resign after his shameful social media posts emerged, he cited personal reasons. This is the bloke who called for people to drown. Didn't get a hero's welcome on stage at the conference. I think you have to call for people to be killed in their beds for that to happen, to be burned alive. That gets you the hero's welcome. This fellow resigned for, quotes, personal reasons, prompting the party to respond. It's disappointing that the level of abuse Wayne and his family have been receiving has meant that he is no longer able to carry on as a councillor. I'm not aware of anybody calling for him to be shot at by Royal Navy boats, but anyway, the level of abuse he received was so awful, according to Reform, because he could have been an excellent champion for the people of Eccleshall and Nossal. And finally, things about which Reform UK chose not to complain, contact the police or apologise, is a candidate called Adele Taggart, who was found to have posted on social media picture of, and this is her own post, it's not a post of somebody else wearing a picture, wearing a T-shirt featuring this picture. This is a picture she posted herself. England's Chief Medical Officer Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance, the former government Chief Scientific Advisor, a post of them saying these two want stringing up, blood on their hands. These two want stringing up, blood on their hands. So there, and it was a fairly cursory scan of my memory banks for stories that might add to Zach Polanski's permission. There are 10 examples, and I've just remembered, a couple of you have reminded me, that if you attended or remember when there were a lot of protests on the streets regarding Brexit, Brexiters were photographed on more than one occasion with actual homemade guillotines. I remember one in particular featuring the European Union flag as a sort of base for a guillotine. Now, do you believe that those people were genuinely intending to hang prominent Remainers? Or do you think it was theatre? A physical equivalent to a figure of speech? I don't know, but they are currently queuing up to claim that when Zach Polanski posted a photograph of a man in a T-shirt featuring a guillotine and the words, "We're making plans for Nigel," he was inciting murder, even though he has persuasively argued that he hadn't even clocked the picture itself because it came in a large tranche of photographs. There are 10 examples of comparable or worse behaviour undertaken not by people wearing T-shirts in tweets that were shared by members of Reform, but by the actual members of Reform, up to and including Nigel take a knife, pick up a rifle, Farage. And I don't know now, actually, to go back to the beginning and remind ourselves of Zach Polanski's rationale for not apologising, I don't know now whether he should or not. I was pretty adamant yesterday that he should have done, on the grounds that nobody should be engaging in this sort of behaviour. But if the person demanding the apology does this kind of thing for fun, do you strengthen there? I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to tell me what you think. Here's his reason for not apologising.
Well, if I'd done it deliberately, I'd be apologising. But because this was a mistake, I think the important thing is that I point out it's a mistake, that I also make sure that I condemn political violence. And also, crucially, I make a commitment to be better on my social media.
OK. Do you want to apologise then or not?
No. The reason for that is because Nigel Farage, when I posted this, or when the person posted it, it got less than 1,000 likes. Nigel Farage then took it, cropped it, so it made it look like I posted it, which I think was fundamentally dishonest. It's now had 3.2 million views. So actually, this whole conversation has been seen more because Nigel Farage, the Yusuf, and I think Richard Tice posted it. So I'm accepting my responsibility in that I shouldn't have accepted that collaboration. I'm accepting that we all need to condemn political violence. But I also think the reporting to the police, the ramping up of the language to say this is incitement to murder me, feels like that's also putting me in a dangerous spot.
So what do you think? Should he apologise for it? I've apologised for things that I did by mistake. I can't remember loads of examples off the top of my head, but I posted a little video, I think last year, and I hadn't watched it to the end. I genuinely can't remember what the context was, but at the end contained some anti-Semitic comments. And as soon as I was made aware of what the full... I didn't even post it. I just said on air, I've watched this video, it's really funny, and I described a bit of it that I'd seen. But thinking back, I'm not quite sure how. But other people obviously had watched all of it and decided to try to pretend that I had. So I immediately apologised and said I had no idea when I said that I'd enjoyed that video, that it went on to be profoundly unpleasant. So there's me apologising for something I did by accident. I still think that was probably the right thing to do. It definitely was the right thing to do. But Zach Polanski has a point, doesn't he? I don't know about the numbers thing. What do you think about the numbers thing? Does that matter? Because I might have just shared with you, no, I don't think that works for Zach Polanski, because you might not have known that this bloke in Lancashire called for a serving Labour MP to be shot. So by me bringing to your attention the fact that a man about whom Nigel Farage never apologised nor condemned called for a Labour MP to be shot, I have now increased the sum total of awareness of that action. And if I genuinely believed that was an incitement, this is Zach Polanski's point, if I genuinely believed that was an incitement to murder, I wouldn't have shared it with you. So I think Zach Polanski's point is, if they genuinely believed this was an incitement to murder, why would they have brought it to the attention of an extra 3 million potential murderers? So that's a bit more nuanced than I appreciated as well. Do the numbers matter? And I think Polanski has said that he sort of aspires to being a sort of left-wing version of Farage. So he's speaking to populism there, which is, to me, not a pretty ambition. So is he almost becoming a victim of his own decisions and tactics? That's your question. That's a record-breaking introduction, but obviously that was rather more than a monologue. It was a very important reminder of how important it is for all of us to remember what lies behind the latest public pronouncements of political figures. And, for example, to claim deep discomfort at either images. It wasn't a guillotine, you wombat. It was a noose, a gibbet. It was a gibbet, a scaffold and a hangman's noose. I remember that. I remember seeing one demonstrator carrying an effigy of Theresa May, which described her as a traitor, while another was marching around with a model of a scaffold and a hangman's noose. I don't remember Nigel Farage reporting any of them to the police, or indeed writing heartfelt editorials for the Daily Mail about how unsafe it all makes him feel. Or makes everybody feel. So, extraordinarily, I've taken this all the way up to 1:45, but I'm still going to be able to squeeze in your call. Should Zach Polanski apologise? I still think he should. I don't see what he's got to lose. But maybe I'm missing something. It would not, as you know, be the first time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
And there it is. Should he or shouldn't he? I think he should apologise because he has to be better than them. Zach Polanski, if he's serious about providing a political alternative to British voters, has to be better than the people who don't condemn their own colleagues for sharing calls for Labour MPs to be shot. He has to be better than the party that invites a convicted criminal onto the stage, having watched her serve a prison sentence for incitement to racial hatred. He has to be better than the people, the candidates, the party whose candidates called for Chris Whitty to be strung up. He has to be better than the party that is led by a man who's threatened to take a knife to the civil service. He has to be better than the party whose leader has threatened to pick up a rifle if Brexit doesn't go his own way. He has to be better than a man who shared the lies of an alleged rapist while arguing that the actual genuine news sources were somehow misleading the British public and arguably helped foment the violence that we saw on the streets in the aftermath of the Southport murders. I think he has to be better than the party who reinstated a councillor who called for potholes to be filled up with melted down Nigerians. I think he has to, doesn't he? Caroline's in Milton Keynes. What do you think, Caroline?
I was thinking yesterday, James, that he should apologise. And even this morning I was tempted to think that he should apologise. But having thought about it, I don't think that he should. And my reason for this is that whichever way he turns, he's going to be, put in an invidious position. But thinking about how the minds of the likes of the Youssef and Richard Tyson, Nigel Farage think, if Zach apologises, I think they'll throw their hands up and say, there you are, he's accepted guilt, he's guilty, and they've already complained to the police. And if the police then do look into it and decide there's nothing to see here,
which is what happens.
Extra fuel to the fire for them to say two-tier policing system, one set of rules for them, another one for them.
Do you know what I am? I'm such a because I did interrupt you there, but I managed to stop myself because they investigated Farage over the threats to take a knife to the civil service. And they concluded that there was no case to answer. And I was about to say, oh, no, they can't do that because exactly the same thing happened to him. So they can't claim two-tier policing because Farage was also investigated for incitement for relatively spurious grounds. But I'm presuming that they're going to act honestly or consistently. And that's probably a little bit optimistic of me, isn't it?
I think so. I think they blow whichever way the wind's blowing, that's the way they'll go.
But doesn't Polanski have to be better? Don't be bitter, be better. Better.
I think he has already been better. I think he gave a very good representation of himself. He's explained very cogently why, he doesn't feel that he needs to apologise. I think that he has credibility. And, there's that, what? It's pandering to the bully in the playground as well, isn't it? Farage is a narcissistic bully, and it is that fine line. How much do you appease them? How much is it then just pandering?
So when you apologise for, and then they could borrow this list of 10 examples, then I'll apologise for what I did.
Kind of, yeah.
And that's what I think Polanski said.
I think be very, very careful with his words.
Because of what they would do with the apology otherwise. Because if someone accuses, I shouldn't have posted a picture of a man in a T-shirt with a guillotine on it, but it would now look as if he was apologising for inciting murder or for inciting violence, which he categorically clearly is not doing any more than Nigel Farage was genuinely inciting violence when he called for, when he threatened to personally pick up a gun or personally take a knife to the civil service. So maybe. A few people suggesting that this is all a big distraction from the £5 million story that continues to beset Nigel Farage. If you're not aware of that story, he secretly accepted £5 million from a foreign-based billionaire whose fortune is set to increase exponentially if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister and introduces policies regarding cryptocurrency that they had actually announced they were going to introduce. I'm not aware of any posted document on, for example, social care or defence, like a carefully laid out, fully detailed policy position, but they definitely had one on cryptocurrency. They subsequently deleted it. I'll leave you to speculate on why that would be, but anyway, that £5 million story is not going anywhere, and of course it's not the only inquiry, as Henry Riley reminded us yesterday. So it may well be a distraction, but you don't become part of the distraction by discussing this story, as long as you remember to keep all the other ones on the boil as well. Caroline, thank you. So there's a change of mind there. John's in Birmingham. John, what do you think?
I just think it's like kids in a playground, sort of bitching at each other and, if you apologise, I'll apologise. It's ridiculous. The facts seem to me, and Polanski said it last night, yes, I inadvertently retweeted something that I shouldn't, and that was wrong. If he'd apologised for that, all the heat in this would have gone, and it would have made Farage look a bigger idiot than he already is, because they're trying to stir up division and animosity in the worst possible way, and it's just I think most of us, the great unwashed, are sick of it. Absolutely sick.
And it is actually a reminder of the kind of politics that Andy Burnham seems to be successfully rising above at the moment, but we'll have to wait and see whether that lasts. Yeah. The argument against what you say, I think I'm closer to your position than I am to Caroline's personally, if anyone's interested. But the argument against that, of course, is that by the time it reached our ears, the great unwashed John, it was an accusation of incitement to murder. Yeah, so it would then, any apology could, as Caroline pointed out, could be manipulated or even construed as an apology for the thing he was accused of by them, rather than, I think, disingenuously and absurdly, rather than the thing that he actually did, which is an inadvertent picture posting of a bloke in a T-shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the meme, that T-shirt, yes, offensive it is. But does anybody in their right mind actually think that was intended to be go out, get yourself a handy guillotine, find Mr. Farage and stick his head in it? No, absolutely not.
Any more than he literally intended to go and start stabbing civil servants in the event of his mythical Brexit not being somehow miraculously delivered by Theresa May. But he's never apologised for that. But he said he should have said an axe rather than a knife.
I think it's just a poor demonstration of very poor intellect, that they haven't got the words, the nice words, the right words, that they can use them in a way that can have still the rousing effect to their followers without being so ridiculous.
Yes.
It's a dangerous world out there.
We don't need guillotines. We don't need knives. We don't need to talk about guns. We don't need gibbets. We don't need calling for people to be shot. We don't need to talk about melting down Nigerians. And just because they do it a hell of a lot more than anybody else does, doesn't give anybody else the right to do it as well, and then not apologise.
Yeah. But do you not think, though, some of this is just about grabbing airtime? Because
I think Farage is desperate to sort of rediscover his status with the right-wing media. He's desperately casting around for anything at the moment that A, stops people asking him questions about the secret 5 million quid he accepted from a foreign-based billionaire whose fortune is set to increase exponentially if Nigel Farage introduces cryptocurrency policies that he has already promised to introduce, and the investigations into the young man that reportedly calls him daddy, is a member of an old aristocratic family and has been making donations both financially and in kind in interesting circumstances. I think so. There's an element of that more than anything else. But also, I think what he does is whine. His narrative of perpetual victimhood is a large part of his identity. Today, they're whining about him not being invited to Andy Burnham's all-party or cross-party consultation on social policy, even though by resigning as an MP, he excludes himself from consideration. So the whining is the point sometimes, John, rather than the thing being whined about. It's the noise that appeals to his supporters. It's the noise of whining. They respond to it like cats respond to cats. Yeah, we're the real victims here. That, I think, is the point. But, yeah, I think I'd probably agree with you. Just apologise for the thing that you did while making a mockery of the thing that they're accusing you of doing. And I think, finally, John's in Shepton Mallet. John, what would you... 2 Johns, honestly. You wait all show for 1 John and then 2 come along at once. What do you want to say, John?
Yeah, hi there. You're right. Try and make it quick, James. Last night I think he should have apologised, only for exactly the reason you said. There's 10 points minimum that he could have listed after the apology and said, like, look, for us now to apologise for X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Or all 10 of them. You do it brilliantly. But before, because I know it's getting close to the news, etc.
Well, it never bothers me, mate, but you carry on being all professional.
Well, okay, but what I was going to say is, I think he's got a good point here, because where he told it down after 1,000, now it's went to 3 million, or God knows how many idiots are out there. Now he's got a target on his back, times 3 million.
Well, the point he made, that the people who have been successfully persuaded that he is dangerous, if they were... unstable or whatever the appropriate word to use is. He did make that point. I mean, it all hinges on how many people actually believe that these acts, these posts, these words, these pictures are genuine incitements. And, of course, the dishonesty that's required to believe that a T-shirt was an incitement, but a call to actually shoot a Labour MP was not, is so high that the rest of us are left sort of a little bit baffled as to how you can hold both situations simultaneously. That is why this is, quite obviously, two-tier policing of political language being undertaken by the people who are normally lying about two-tier policing of people. It is coming up to 1 o'clock. That is it from me for today. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on the free Global Player app, or indeed the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinions. You can listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the short version of this show. So do download that for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now, standing in for Sheila Fogarty, it's Asma Mir.
James O'Brien on LBC.